Gonna edge my heart here. I have to just see. I just have to fool around with something. Okay. So, yeah. BPD relationship breakups and codependent victims. And how many people who have been victimized or may still be being victimized by someone with borderline personality. How many are really seeking the narrative that you want, what you want to be true about this person with BPD that was in your life, or all of them for that matter, right? And I'm not here to defend people with BPD, but well, I can admit to being pretty perturbed for the last day or so, feeling like what's the point of being on this bloody platform in so many different ways, to be really honest about it. And so one of the things, and it hasn't occurred recently, but I finally went and watched one of those videos that somebody asked me to watch. Never again, okay? Sam Vaknin, I don't care who likes him. I don't care who thinks he's 100% right. I don't care what you think. After I'm done talking about this tonight, I'm not talking about him again because he's going to keep doing what he's going to keep doing because he likes the cutting edge of maybe sometimes informing, but lots of the rest of the time just being a self-aggrandizing, malignant narcissist, comorbid psychopath that he is. So, I went and watched the video because, somebody asked me to, so I went and checked it out. His video, borderline triangulates with rescuer to silence, pain, abandonment anxiety. Well, first thing I like to say, simply straight up, is son of a bitch. Malignant narcissist psychopath. What does that mean about this guy to start with? He is ipso facto, due to his malignant narcissism, a misogynist pig. So let's just start there. Yeah, I'm here for men, and I hear men, and I work with men, and I care about that side too. But just as a woman, and no, I'm not borderline anymore, and I got no skin in the game, but all we ever hear about, and all that's going on out there, is vilify the borderline woman, the borderline woman, the borderline woman, never the borderline man. So by the very nature of this narrative, okay, not just from that one YouTuber, but from psychiatry, the American Psychiatric Association itself, it's misogyny. Let me say that straight up. The continued pathologizing of BPD up the yin-yang and beyond belief is a misogynistic as well as otherwise agenda. And frankly, somebody has to speak truth to malignant narcissist psychopath, misogynist. Somebody has to speak truth to the power of the pseudoscience of the APA with a hegemony of big pharma. Somebody has to do it. And that happens to be me. And it doesn't make me happy at all. So anyway, here we go. I'm going to get to the point where I'm not mocking people with codependency being victims of people with BPD. But what I am, frankly, I shouldn't say tired of hearing, because if clients bring it, that's different. But what I'm sick of seeing all over the internet is how these just vilified, and I'm not here to protect them, but the vilification of borderline women because they just do nothing but seduce. Now remember, there are men with BPD, and way more than that YouTuber I referred to. You know, he says 25%. Yeah, based on what? No, it's about a 50-50 diagnostic thing, and has been for a long time. So we don't talk much about the men, which I'm going to change that here on my channel soon. We're going to talk a lot about the men with BPD, for women and for gay men. And the other thing I would like some heterosexual males to remember is, yes, you've been really hurt by somebody with BPD. I'm not here to change that narrative. I'm not here to question your narrative. And you can believe whatever you want to believe. But the thing is, when is enough ever going to be enough on the vilification of, in particular, borderline women? So things are changing. everything, almost everything that's being said out there right now never applied to me when I had BPD, so it's not personal. And I don't have BPD anymore, but I just didn't have any of that stuff going on. So what does that mean about what's happening with BPD today or not? I don't know. But how come everything is pathologized some more, the borderline woman, and what about the borderline man? I mean, to me, it's just glaringly obvious. So, that video he did, I got a couple things to say here, because if nobody else is going to pummel me with questions about everything he says, like they do sometimes. Yeah, in the video he says, near the beginning, that this is the third in his series on BPD, and yes, I guess he did a video prior. He said, partners, in the first video, quote, titled Borderline Women, whatever, a dissociative secondary, I don't know, this isn't making sense. We received the current, hang on, this is actually from a transcript of his bloody video. Yeah, so anyways, yada, yada, yada. Everybody's wrong but him. Nobody matters. We're just all self-styled, whatever. And you know, advocates and or women with BPD. And, of course, Vaknin is a living end-all, the be-all of information. If you believe that, you know, seriously, come on. He isn't. So, he talks about the borderline woman as a secondary psychopathy, not proven, flawed ideology. That's all we got right now. And then he talks about them as being, you know, like this DID thing again, which again, DID is not even believed in by a lot of professionals, and it is known to be exceedingly rare. So where is this coming from? Well, you know. So anyway, he said, we reviewed the current literature, current academic literature, and the most recent thinking about borderline personality disorder. Now, the most recent thinking, yeah, by some, not by all professionals, and most recent thinking doesn't ipso facto there make facts. And the other thing is that, oh, I can't remember what the other was, but then, okay, so he goes on, quote, this provoked a hailstorm of negative reaction from various, self-appointed activists, self-styled experts. That would be me. I'm a self-styled expert next to the grandiose, narcissistic, misogynist psychopath, and borderline women. And he said, of course, we are not psychopaths, is what he said the borderline women said. Gee, I wonder why. Anyway, he said that people said he was wrong, that people with BPD, I guess women said we don't dissociate. That wouldn't be accurate. And then he said, and I'm afraid this flies in the face of all the evidence we have currently. The thinking. Can I just say thinking? Since when is thinking evidence? Right? Of what? Thinking? The thinking is, this is a direct quote from his video, the thinking is that borderline personality disorder is a manifestation of psychopathy in women. Yeah, the thinking, no proof. And then again, you know, subset of 10% more severely impacted? I don't know. Every single woman with BPD? Get out of here. Anyway. And then, let's see, what else did he say? Oh, yes, quote, not the type described by Robert Hare among males. No, because that's special and different, isn't it, Vaknin? But another type of psychopathy factor to psychopathy. Nah. Anyway. Then he goes on, quote, also the current thinking is a borderline personality disorder involved dissociation that borderline personality disorder involves dissociation to such an extent that it can be safely and reliably described, no, it's not safe or reliable, but whatever, as a form of dissociative identity disorder, or at the very least, as a form of extreme dissociation. Well, yeah, you know what? For a lot of people with BPD, be they women or men, the levels of dissociation within BPD, which is absolutely a part of BPD, vary greatly. So I never had severe, extreme dissociation, but I had dissociation. It was pretty scary and no fun, but I always knew what day it was and where I was. So, not that what's happening for a lot of people with BPD is the same as like way back 30 plus years ago for some reason or reasons. And so then he said, quote, "It seems that model ability, lack of impulse control, externalized aggression, and other manifestation of borderline behavior have to do with alterations in self states. The borderline is a diffuse identity." Well, no, the borderline isn't that. But anyway, what I wanted to point out and what he said there again was, where is it now? It seems that. The thinking is, it seems that. This is him walking back a lot of assuredness from a previous video. So, does he sound 100% convinced, and does that even matter? So he goes on and on to describe all this nonsense. Okay, so now let me just flip over really quickly to... No, that's not it. I got too many windows open. Don't tell me I closed that one. Oh, I might have, and that would suck. Oh, I think I did. Okay, well, I had a PubMed article up. The final edition of it, it was originally written in 2012. And the reality there is that the professionals who have done the, quote, pseudoscience studies, unquote, that's my words, those professionals use language in their PubMed article, professional article, like the thinking is, or it seems like. They use the same kind of language because they don't have any proof. So my thing is simply this, right? I'm here to talk about what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to do what I have to do. I'm here to offer what I have to offer. And, I've been putting up with this nut for, since I got online, when he first emailed me. So does he listen to the channel or not? Does he give a shit? I don't care. I just don't want to talk about, I go over there and I look at these things, and I try not to go over there very often anymore. Because frankly, he has his reasons for everything he does. I mean, I have mine too, but mine don't happen to involve trying to aggrandize my damn self. Matter of fact, I'm doing the opposite because I'm going to be the lone voice out here who keeps on saying, there's none of this in evidence. There's none of this proven. And what is the reason among all of the labels and quote psychiatric diagnoses, unquote, among all of them, is there one picked on, vilified, pathologized, attacked? Is there one more that is, what's happening to females with BPD? Is there one more like that among them all? And the answer is no. And then the question is, what's up with that? So, anyway, when I went to see that video, which was no fun to listen to, because I just don't like listening to a frickin' automaton trying to act like a charming human being, because he is not that. And in case you're wondering, I have a lot of empathy, whatever people want to believe. I'm not, counter to talking about what men have experienced with women with BPD, etc., etc. But I want to hear their experience. I don't want to hear the words of some other YouTuber that people are always listening to. Well, I mean, when people listen to, not all people, but then people come back and say to me, well, what do you think of this, AJ? What do you think of that? What does it matter? Because let me just straight up say, I think the day that he and I will ever see things the same is never coming. Has never been, and never will be. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Because I take seriously what it means, what his pathology is. I take it extremely seriously. But the rest of the internet just jumps on what he says. Why? It's clickbait. It's popular. It gets some views, etc. And some of them, I don't know, may care, but I guess if they're just parroting him, they don't care at all to think for themselves. So anyway, yeah, that gets to me sometimes because it's nonsensical. Anyway, so is this a narrative? What he said in that video, is this a narrative that some men really want to hear? And if it is, fine. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion. And the other thing I would say is, why do you want to hear it? More to the point, why do you need to hear it? And the other thing is that when I was over there and saw that video, it's like I just opened the comments and it's like nobody, not a one person, questions him at all. You ever looked at the comments on my channel? Oh, it's like I don't have a clue what I'm talking about, no matter what I've just said, and like often. And so, what's up with that? How does this guy who thinks of himself as a quote god, like narcissists are, these malignant narcissists are, as he describes, godlike or God, and nobody dare challenge him. Why? Because he uses uber jargon. I can cut through his jargon. I hear what he's saying. I could parse through that video more, but that's not what the purpose of this is, because he contradicts himself 4 to 6 times in every video, never mind across different videos on this subject. I don't care about the other ones, like, whatever he says. But the point is, on BPD, he's a walking frickin' contradiction. And then now he's got his latest video up there is some nonsensical thing with music in the background about how much he just wants to play like a child. I'm like, there's something really wrong with that dude, even more than what's supposed to be wrong with that dude. Well, Wheels, it was a 10-month-old video somebody asked me to go watch. But this time I'm not here. Like, I'm not here to talk about it for the whole stream because that would be like ridiculous. People can go over there and listen to him if that's what you gotta do. But I have his video transcribed, so I'll probably be doing another video or two on this. I have lost right now in my browsers, the PubMed, several of the professional, quote, super important, not really, literature, where they have these studies and where they use words like, we are thinking, it seems like, and the other word that was used, I just closed that browser by mistake earlier, is they said, it seems as though. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but is this the terminology of science? Is it like, well, gee, this is hardcore science. We got proof. It seems like it. We're thinking about it. We might believe it. It could be. So anyway, it leads me into the question, which I've already been, asking people to think about, which is, so after the borderline, the BPD relationship breakup, people with codependency have been victimized, yes. But the borderline does not seduce you. Well, they might be seductive, but they don't seduce you alone. They don't suck you into the relationship. They don't make you do it. And of course, you might not know what's going on at all. So there's that, right? But then, is that all the borderline's fault? Because they don't know what they're doing either. Like I did a video about how it is an unconscious setup on both sides. People with codependency don't know what they're dealing with, and maybe they don't even know they have codependency yet. People with BPD are not doing anything like what a narcissist or malignant narcissist, or most of them, would be doing, which is they're actively targeting. But are they also aware? Because even the one that seems like he wants to be the godlike father of all, like normalizing malignant narcissism and psychopathy in himself and others, because at the end of the day, everybody has to be reduced to a narcissist for that guy. Does nobody get what this is about? The other thing is, this is where and why he comes up with the idea, the notion, the ridiculous thing that's not said anywhere in clinical literature that I can find, that borderlines are failed narcissists, which frankly is just funny as all get out of here. Because, I don't know. Whatever he wants to say about borderlines, here's a fact for you. People with BPD can heal and recover. Narcissists like Vaknin are doomed. So there you go. So So should somebody feel like they failed at something because they got diagnosed with BPD and not narcissistic personality disorder? I hardly think so. Wheels, it's quality academic work when it's full of weasel words. Yeah, of course. And a lot of quality, quote, academic work, and I know you're being sarcastic, is full of weasel words. And especially in this area. But the thing is, yeah, it's that guy again. But the thing is, it's more to the point how people go over there, which is people's business. They go over there and swallow what he says, lock, stock, and barrel. And, part of that, to be, well, I don't need to be fair, but to be reasonable and to not, I'm not black and white about things. In that video, did he say some things that were accurate? Yeah, he did. But not on those two subjects. BPD is like DID. BPD is so comorbid with DID, because of this self-state stuff. Well, this is spreading, without a doubt. But this idea of how could a borderline, so if they want to refer to it as self-states, great. What's that mean when you have no self? How do you have a self-state without a self? So people with DID are clearly not borderline because they have a self, and more to the point, many of them. And that's a whole different kind of a hugely trauma response, but it's exceedingly freaking rare. Yeah, well, John, you're the one that asked me to go listen to that claptrap. And now you're saying it's hilarious when Backman says self-styled experts. Yeah, well, because, if that's what he thinks the rest of us are, us peons down here, what the hell is he? Right? So, there you go. I guess it's the grandest of grandiose projections. I don't care about that stuff. All I know is, and if people, you want to go over there, you want to listen to him, you believe everything he says, well, then I would say to people with codependency who've been victimized by a borderline or a narcissist, as you were victimized in childhood, and that part of your healing recovery journey is to go from being a victim to finding your way to being a survivor, and then further down the road to being a thriver. But too many people with codependency, after they've been really, really hurt by borderlines, I get that, are seeking the narrative that they want. The one that what? What does it do? Does it help with the damaged, wounded ego? Does it help with other aspects of how traumatized you are? But it's not going to help you heal. It's going to keep you stuck. So, and I had a video up before, the one about watch out for the, Hoover and untreated borderline. But the same question applies. Do you want to hear what you want to hear? Because then I'm not your go-to person. Because I'm not going to tell you what you bloody want to hear just because you bloody want to hear it. I'm going to tell you more like what you need to think about, or, like what might help you more than what you might want to hear. Like I've talked about the fact that when people, are in these relationships, which no, they're not healthy, and no, I'm not defending them, but people with codependency, you have the experience, and I believe people's experiences, so it doesn't matter about this part. When I work with clients, like if they, that's why I call it, there is a cluster B predatory male and a cluster B, what did I just say? Predatory female. They may both come from the lesser percent of more severely impacted people right now diagnosed as BPD. But to me, that's just the greatest of all. I don't really mean setups like it's planned. But what is the pseudoscience of psychiatry playing at? Because, ladies and gentlemen, they don't, with the odd exception of some psychiatrists out there, their DSM, their whole thing they got going on, it's hegemony of big pharma. It's like everything in the U.S., no offense to Americans, it's privatized. It's big, 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 big money. And so at the end of the day, and I think one of the changes for what's being said, and it's being said so much about women with BPD, well, it applies to men too. And frankly, when I think back to when I had BPD, worlds, like 10 years ago even. I mean, I've been recovered for 30 plus years, but 10 years ago, we were not seeing The linguistics, the language, the explanations, none of this crap was even out there. Nor were people with BPD acting the way that they all seem to be now. Or not all, but a lot. So what is happening besides what the APA is up to? Because they can't make reality, and reality doesn't match with what they say more often than not, like in totality. So what is going on that is making BPD seemingly much more formidable? But again, the other thing I want to say before I go any further, and this really gets my goat now, and it's not because I had BPD, and it's not just when I say male-female thing, I'm talking about Backman is a misogynist, okay? Because malignant narcissist males are misogynists, ipso facto. Just like malignant narcissist females have misandry. So it goes both ways. But I still contend that in the power center of the APA, you've got nothing but patriarchal, misogynist bastards. Okay? Just to be really frank with my language. That doesn't mean they're all like that. But in the power center, what else would explain this continued haunting vilification of just women with BPD? And I'm not saying some of them out there aren't like really in terrible states with lots of stuff going on and they're really traumatizing people. Okay, we know that. But I just think these narratives that are not proven and not evidentiary fact matter, right? So, but people can think whatever they want to think. But again, do you know that there are more men with BPD in prison than females? And that's where they get studied. And yet the fact that more males with BPD are in prison doesn't seem to suggest that perhaps they should be looked at more closely, that they might have a lot more stuff going on that's even like somewhat worse than the borderline female. And in the studies that I've read from the prison, like the prison studies of people in jail with BPD in prison, says 76, and again, this is all arbitrary, but this is what the studies say, 76% of men with BPD in prison, the prison population, have this, what they might think is this secondary psychopathy thing. Why not just diagnose them as psychopaths, get real? There's a difference between BPD and psychopathy. And BPD has really just still not been proven at all to be secondary psychopathy. So 76% of men in prison populations, they identify with this supposed, maybe it seems like, we don't know, but sounds good. And only 26% of females with BPD in the prison population seem to have this sort of, it seems like we're thinking, it looks like it could be that they have secondary psychopathy. So what's up with that? Prison studies showing that it's way worse in men, whatever, quote, the it factor of it is, because I don't think it has to be secondary psychopathy at all. And then now, as to what that other YouTuber said, well, I don't know where he read, saw, or whatever, somebody might have intimated, or was he just going on his own thing? This idea that, women, no, I think it was his idea, because I've seen it in the literature that doesn't make much sense, doesn't matter, put in different ways. But it's as if he's trying to say, because, he is a malignant narcissist psychopath, though he walks back the psychopath part, and he's uber credentialed. He's a professor of everything everywhere. Yeah, right. Okay, well, I got some swampland in Florida for you, too. Just saying. Anyway, it's what he's been doing online for 26 frickin' years, and I've been here to witness it all. And I'm not the only one, but I'm the one with the mouth who'll say it, okay? Because we've witnessed all of his credentials come and go and come and go and come and go and be disproven over and over and over again. I don't know what's going on now. I don't care. I'm not going to touch it with a 10-foot pole. I'm just giving you the history. So, and none of that even matters. But again, people think when he speaks, quote, God, unquote, has spoken. The very same people have not only been victimized and traumatized by borderlines, but narcissists, malignant narcissists, and people exactly like back then. Like, hello, I don't get people out there. Some people, just saying. Anyway, What was the other point I was going to make? Oh, I don't know if I remember it now. Because, he can say whatever he wants, but the trouble is when people just blind... Well, people that blindly believe what he says, not really my concern, is it, right? But I guess I happen to care, sort of. And, John, well, you watched the back end triangulation BPD. Wait, yeah, I did. And now I'm disgusted. Are you surprised? I've got it in transcript form. I open up the PubMed. I read the stuff. I mean, yeah, there are people, quote, studying. They may as well go home and pick their noses for all the good they're doing. They're just muddying the waters more. They're not helping the treatment of anything that's going to help people to not fall into more of these relationships and be traumatized by people with BPD and NPD, malignant narcissists and dark triads and psychopaths, etc. But anyway, yeah, I watched it. And like I said, some of this information in there, weaving in and out, has accuracy, but the rest of it, oh my god. Anyway, yeah, it was just a matter of having time to go do it and also trying to motivate myself to do something that I find extremely distasteful to do, which is simply listen to him, period. And I mean, period, pretty much, not just on BPD. And Wheels, the best lies are often mixed with a little truth. Oh yeah, and who knows that better than narcs and psychopaths and dark triads? Nobody knows it better than they do. Because at that level of pathology, which is where pathology belongs, they are totally, I'm not saying they're all aware. Bacton thinks he's so aware. And yet he wouldn't know an emotion if it bit him in the goddamn nose. And that's the other thing that I find funny. Is he's going to describe how the borderline woman feels and guy doesn't even know how he feels. You know what I'm saying? Anyway. And what were you saying there, Wheels? Yeah, get something right, he's still probably lying. Well, he got a few things right in that video, I wouldn't dispute. But that's not the problem, is it? It's more the other stuff. And Natalie said, yes, caught this at 21 minutes in. Oh, well, good for you. I had to catch it from the beginning. Like a bad cold, this topic, I'll tell you. John, tell me what you found inaccurate with the Vactin. Oh, I already started talking about that BPD triangulation video. Because that's exactly what happened to me. How do you know that, John? How do you know that? And triangulation isn't the issue. And I don't know, maybe he had another video. The video I watched was borderline triangulates with rescuer to silence pain, abandonment, anxiety. And what I object to is his putting forward unscientifically, not proven science, where everybody uses the words like, the thinking is, it's possible that, it seems like, oh yes, and in the other PubMed article, the professional who was involved in this, one of these studies, said it could be suggested that. So, that there's secondary psychopathy in women with BPD, or that BPD is the female variant of ASPD, which is just freaking ridiculous. So that's what I disagree with. And the idea that, so are you telling me that your borderline was a psychopath? Is that what you're trying to say? And I can hear your experience on that. So don't get me wrong. If that's what you mean. Or do you mean that she triangulated you? Or do you mean that she had DID, alters, and all kinds of these wacky self states running around when people with BPD don't have a self to have a state problem? So I don't know when you say that's exactly what happened to you, John, what exactly you mean is what exactly happened to you. And just a second here, I'm going to switch over to the phone, where it's easier to see right up in my freaking face. Oh, Ryan, hang on. Was I there? No, I haven't got down there yet. Wait a minute. Ryan said, speaking as a borderline man, his cluster B musical chairs aren't doing it for me either. Well, there you go. And believe me, for people with BPD, the last thing that's needed is more vilification and more of this, frankly, straight up bullshit. Because it's pathologizing human beings up the yin yang. And how does anybody think that's going to want to make these people who are still human beings get treatment or trust anybody? Seriously. And the other thing I didn't say, what else did you say, Ryan? Feels like some type of game he's playing. Well, very much it is. It's called aggrandizing himself and trying to control the whole narrative and have everybody adore him and fall at his feet. It's exactly what it is. But the other thing is a dangerous game he's playing too. But the other thing I was going to say, geez, it keeps escaping me. Maybe it'll come back again. Yeah, gone again. Maybe it'll come back again. Host runner, how can the BPD remorseful behavior of hurting you and wanting you back after parasuicide threats and cutting contact with you can be distinguished from NPD hoovering? Well, that's an interesting question, because I mean you no disrespect, but that's flawed and confusing as heck before you even get to I'm going to try to answer it. How can a person with BPD, if they're first of all, remorse is not a behavior, it's a feeling. Remorseful behavior of hurting you, so you were hurt. Then they want you back. Okay, after parasuicide threats and cutting, they contact you. What is distinguished from NPD hoovering? Well, narcissists, believe it or not, will be more charming than dramatic. So, the borderline with what you're describing there, it's a hoover, straight up. It's a hoover, and it's a hoover from an untreated borderline. So, promises you absolutely nothing different than you've already been through. Narcissist, it's not true they're all the same, but distinguishing what you're describing, host runner, from a NPD hoover, I don't even get why is that relevant? So narcissists hoover in a variety of ways, but often it's not like people with BPD, because they're not coming back with remorse or any feelings, or they come back with a suave kind of arrogant charm. The verb, charm, they're just going to snow you over again because they're so special. And of course, it could be a little different for the covert or the fragile or whatever narcissist, but that's about the most I can say to that, because it's a confusing question, no offense. Well, Natalie, you just have to catch up. I'm not here to give replays while I'm in the middle of doing what I'm doing. Bend, Oregon, awesome. You said hi, like as if you are high. Are you high? You didn't say hi like hi. Hello. Well, here, yeah, never mind. Hey there, Glob. Bend, Oregon, awesome. I promise to stop abusing. Okay, well, I don't know who you're abusing or what that's about, but, okay. Or is that what a hoovering borderline said to you? I don't know. Boy, some people think I can read, I don't have a crystal ball here. I can't read people's minds. Wheels, wait, AJ, you're telling me that a guy who claims to have malignant NPD and once claimed to be, well, he didn't claim to be a psychopath. He's tried to walk that back for a long time. But anyway, claim to be a psychopath might lie about having credentials or give false information. You gotta tell you, AJ, I'm truly shocked. I know. But see, this is the thing, right? And I don't want to talk about that guy anymore ever. But what it is that people are really wounded and hurt by a borderline or a narcissist. In these relationships, codependents are victimized, and by people who've been victimized already in their life, but still, it's not saying, well, it doesn't matter, that part. But the thing is, and then my point more than talking about the other stuff, first of all, it's just to say that it's not science, not in evidence. They use words like seems to be, could be, might be. We think that it's suggested that because they're hunting. And here's the thing I really believe is part of this. I can't pretend to know what they're doing with the pseudoscience of the APA. But there's a reason why I put pseudoscience in front of it. Their studies are ridiculous. Like a lot of them. And especially in this area. So, they don't have any evidence. They don't have any proof. It's like there's a psychiatrist out there. He's not important enough to remember his name anyway. Running around with this theory. It's all it is a theory. But then he puts it out there like it's fact because these psychiatrists are so flippin' important, don't you know? No, they're not really. And they're creating more of an atrocity than any other area of mental health when it comes to trying to understand these things and or treat people, which is really supposed to be the goal. Not, let's make lots of money from big pharma and let's, because the psych meds are one reason why what BPD was compared to what it is today is night and day different, night and day worse. And so, what else is I going to say about psychiatry? It's, the whole idea that none of this is known fact. And that they keep running, it seems like they're trying to medicalize mental health, mental illness. They're trying to medicalize it because they want to be real doctors. I've had psychiatrists tell me that personally, and one of them said it in an interview. It's still on Blog Talk Radio. Dr. Niall McLaren. Psyche Whisperer, AJ Mahari, Blog Talk Radio, you'll find it. The thing is that they're trying to medicalize this because it's the hegemony with Big Pharma, which is about big money, which is not about treating people at all, really, effectively. And they're running it all through, they're running it at women, and they're running it through BPD. Why? Because as soon as they diagnose BPD and they don't straight up diagnose ASPD, they got a med market, don't they? And they're widening their med market with subtypes of BPD and women only that make absolutely no flipping sense. Because these anomalies, these things that might be happening more for some women or men, though, with BPD, it's probably the psych meds that are causing this stuff to begin with. And then they come along behind that, whether they know what's going on with that or not. They come along behind that to vilify, to pathologize some more. Seriously. Oh, you're welcome, Host Runner. I took best shot at it I could. And I think also that, I watched a video last night of Dr. Marsha Linehan that I think I've seen before. And, I mean, if you listen to her speak, even though it was, I found one of her conclusions in there kind of odd. And, but if you listen to her speak, what she had to do with that, there was places in there where, and she wasn't joking. She said, so we had to have this model. We had to do this. We had to meet this criteria and that criteria and that criteria. It sounds more like science than anything I've heard out of psychiatry. That's number one. And number two, she said, so every time a certain challenge came up in when she was developing DBT, within reason. I can't remember exactly what she was referring to. She said, so what I did was I just kept changing. So every time something was questioned, like it would be impossible to go forward, she would change. I can't remember what she said now. She would change something, but not the studies that they did for that. Nothing like that. But just the way she described something, or the way she was, she just said she kept changing things to whatever. So, but there was a lot more science in her process than I've ever heard, read, or seen from anything from psychiatry. Might be why she's more successful with that modality, to the point in which that modality is really great for people with BPD and is being extended to, like, DBT is really helpful to people, so, who've been wounded and victimized by somebody with BPD in healing and recovery journeys and all kinds of other things. John, thanks for checking out the vid, AJ. I appreciate it. My BPD ex totally cut off and devalued me when she felt I wasn't going to marry her. Seemed to turn into a psycho, I remember, then ran away and triangulated with a new guy to punish me. Well, John, I'm sorry that happened to you. That's very horrible, very terrible. But the narrative that you ascribe to it, I mean, she totally cut you off and devalued you. Borderlines do that. That's not secondary psychopathy. When you didn't want to marry her. Yeah, she turned around, she wanted to punish you, but good. That's not psychopathy. And then you said she seemed, there's the word again, to turn into a psycho. But she didn't, John. She's just an out-of-control, wounded puppy, borderline. Untreated, probably. And then you said, then ran away. Well, when she runs away, she's leaving you, ghosting you. It's not really, but discarding you. And I'm really sorry to hear this. But she didn't triangulate you with a new guy to punish you. Like, even if she was going back and forth between you and the other guy. Because, A, why would you allow that? And B, I don't know if that's what you mean. And so C, what happened was you got really abused and burned and punished by a borderline. Period. Where's the secondary psychopathy in that? It's like now if a borderline sneezes, they turn into a psycho when that snot came out their nose. I swear to God. I'm just saying, John, I'm really sorry for your experience, really sorry for the pain. I hear your experience, but the narrative you put on top of it, I don't know if that's accurate, but I believe you about your experience. I hope you can hear the difference there. And on Wheels, I read somewhere that 70% of ECT, quote, therapy, unquote, are women. Even worse, many of them are elderly women on Medicare. Well, yeah. And it's long since been known that ECT is not, it's just nobody should ever have that kind of, quote, treatment, unquote. And when I was, a couple of times, very voluntarily, not out of my mind, not suicidal, when I had BPD, when I was, like about 19 in the summer, I had a voluntary inpatient stay. I don't know that it helped very much, but it was different. And I saw a lot of people that were being treated with, I saw 4 or 5, I shouldn't say a lot, that were getting ECT treatments regularly. And oh my God, like if you see that up close and personal, and you see that person, how they were the day before, even if they were depressed or whatever, and how they are for days, weeks, months after, it's like, and I had a client that I was working with, just a wonderful human being, and it was a man with BPD, and a wonderful man with BPD, struggling so hard with what he was working on and facing. And I'll never know because he took his life, but I do believe that we were close to identifying what it was really all about, and I'll never know if he figured that out, and that's why he killed himself, or if it was something else. But he got into some difficulty that is, I don't want to get specific, so I'm not going to explain it. He got into some difficulty where he needed to interface, or he needed to interface with emergency care where he lived, right, which I can't provide. So he gets into the system, and he gets into, and he'd had ECT before. And he was still doing sessions with me, and they knew that, and I knew where he was, and etc. And then the thing, I was like, I don't literally usually beg clients, but I was really talking to him about, this didn't help you before. How do you feel about it? I don't really think it's a smart thing to do for you going forward. And he was like, no, I don't think I want it anymore either. But he was feeling so horrible, and what he was struggling with was so terrible, and it was so, difficult for him, and I won't say what it was or whatever. And then, but it wasn't psychopathy or DID, let me make that clear. And so then I don't hear from him for a while, and he's still in the hospital where he was, and gets a lot of ECT. And then the next time I hear from him, he wants to come back to working with me, and he's now out of there, But now he's got everything going on that happens to people's brains after ECT. And he was really struggling with that. And then he just felt like even less than, and, he was having a lot of trouble with that. But so long story short, anyway, I don't know. It wouldn't have been too large a gap of time between an enormous amount of ECT treatments, and he'd had many over the years, so just an enormous amount aggregate, but more recent at that time, to where we were making some progress, and he was, things were becoming a little more clear. The ECT stuff was partially wearing off, but no, he wasn't coming back to even what his painful normal would have been. And the next thing you know, I hear he's taken his life. So, when you work in mental health and you work on the front lines and you care about people like I do, you see it all, and it's abysmal what is systemically going on in mental health. It's just abysmal in so many ways. I could talk about it for hours, but that's not what people want. That's not what people care about. They just care, well, and I understand if all you care about is how you got hurt and you need to get out of the relationship and you need to take care of yourself. Yeah, but then why do people have to turn around vilify with these narratives that other people are putting in your head, actually, for you? And it's bad enough what happened to you, right? So, I don't know. Wheels. So if that doesn't tell you how psychiatry works in this country, it's not just America, by the way, Wheels. I don't know what would. Yeah, and in my case, with one client at least, I know, probably more than one, but with this one I know, more than anything else, I believe that's why he took his life. So they did a bang-up job there, didn't they? John, might have just been an out-of-control untreated borderline. Well, that's what I'm trying to suggest, John, which doesn't mean that you weren't hurt or that you weren't abused or that it isn't totally horrible, because it is. But this is the thing that I'm trying to talk about on my channel, where people get, going all over the place, which is your business to do, but the narratives out there and the meaning that gets laid down, the things that you listen to that, it's kind of what you want to hear because you've been so hurt. And I don't mean, people want to hear, you don't go into these things, I want to hear blah, blah, blah. But then when you do, it's like, yeah, that's it. That's exactly what it felt like. That's exactly what happened. And people are layering the meaning and the narrative that isn't helpful on top of what your actual experience was. Because like I said, I really want to be very careful. I don't doubt people's experiences at all. But the way they describe them, or the way that, other people out there will give information that, layers meaning and builds narratives for people that I don't think serve people who just need to try to learn from the beginning to focus on themselves, need to understand a bit about what happened, but this endless hunt for what's really the borderline about, what this obsession that people have is really a roadblock to recovery. Now, I'm not saying you have it, John. I'm just saying a lot of people have it. Wheels, that's horrifying, AJ. I don't understand how causing someone unnaturally severe seizures is considered a treatment for anything, especially in the 21st century. Yeah, well, I'm really sorry it happened too, Wheels, because he was a fine man, and just because he had BPD, what, should he be thrown on the trash heap of humanity? I mean, I still have a hard time thinking about him without feeling a lot, and also, in that case, angry at the system, which is often, I mean, I'm no hero and I'm not perfect and I can't wave a wand and change people with BPD that I work with, but a lot of them are quite successful and they do want to heal and recover. And but the more people with BPD interface with the systemic idiocy of psychiatry, and even emergency departments and hospitals and stuff, the more they end up not being here anymore. Let me just put it that way. Somebody should study that. We had this thing going on where I live, it was around I was going to say it was around in 2000. It was around 2000. I think it was before 2001. There were 3 suicides, or maybe 4, in within a 2-month period or something at the hospital. And one of them was somebody that I knew this person. They weren't a client of mine, but they jumped off the roof. I don't think their problem was BPD either, but they jumped off the roof, the parking garage at the emergency at the hospital, and they committed suicide. And 3 other people managed to commit suicide on the psychiatric ward. And there was no public outcry. I remember I wrote a couple of op-eds. It was scathing of this freaking hospital and the systemic idiocy and just the systemic horror over there. And I remember, next time I had to go over there with a local client, the looks I was getting, like I had, whatever. I'm so used to that. I don't care. Because these people that work in the systems, they get burnt out. The whole thing doesn't work for the people they're trying to treat, especially in certain areas, and they don't seem to give a shit, so, and then, more to the point, the hospital was more concerned about would they have to pay money to the surviving relatives of these people, and, the legal concerns, than they were about the people who lost their lives or figuring out what happened there. And why weren't they protected when they were probably put in the psychiatric ward because they were suicidal? It's like, friggin' ridiculous. Mind you, if somebody's really determined and they get in the suicide tunnel, it's not like... But you'd think on a psychiatric ward you could at least interrupt it for a while. But we can't always have the control. I mean, rarely do we have the control to stop somebody who gets determined that way. Alicia, it's so shocking how the pain hits that I think a more layered story feels better. Well, that's interesting, because I personally would just wonder why, because, I hear you, and it could be different for everybody, but you said it won't help, but I want, through that process of needing it to be more than BPD, you went through the process of needing it to be more than BPD. Well, not everybody that's going to hurt people tremendously even has a diagnosis or even necessarily is a borderline or a narcissist. This is the other gift of social media. Like, they all have to be a cluster B, or else everybody else is fine. Hardly. Person with BPD commented on the channel the other day too, all about how they can love, and they love so wonderfully, and I think they're untreated, and I'm like, whatever. And then they did this false equivalency thing on me, which is nonsensical stuff. They said that because of something I said, I can't remember what I was talking about in the video they commented on, but just about how they don't love and attach or something. And then she's like, about favorite person. I think, it was on one of the videos, because, they're not popular with people with BPD. About the, people with BPD with the favorite person they don't attach. You don't want to be the favorite person of somebody with BPD. Just, so, and then they were like, because I'd said what I said in that video, they're like, so because you said, or whatever, that means we can't love? I think you've got this all wrong, which is typical for somebody untreated BPD to say. And I was just like, whatever, false equivalency, yada yada, John, I've been around long enough to know, while I still ruminate, it does no good to overanalyze her behavior. Well, Vaknin describes factually in that vid what he describes. Oh, you said while. Vaknin describes factually in that vid, quote, resonates, unquote, with me. The technical terms, I cannot be sure. Well, and there's the big rub for me. Like I said, some of the things he said in that video were correct. Were, what I think, some. But this secondary psychopathy argument, wherein he says the thinking is, and the PubMed citation papers say, it seems like, this suggests that, is hardly evidence, right? So, and again, just, whatever, I don't know how it helps, but whatever helps. Like, but for me, I would, I can't, I've seen enough of him in action, I guess, is the problem. But the point is, I would never trust that guy as far as I could throw him, even when he gets stuff right. Because his whole reason d'etre is wrong. Can I put it that way? He's not there with the kind of care and passion that I or others might have. He doesn't feel any of that. He's there to aggrandize himself, and if something happens to help you, well, fine. You're lucky then. But more to the point, I don't know. Just people just go over there and everything he says is golden, like he's a god. What else do I need to say? It doesn't mean he's always wrong. I'm not saying that. But the DID and the secondary psychopathy things are just out there, wobbling around with no evidence for them whatsoever. Alicia, however, after listening to you, I think my ex had a psychotic break. Oh, really? Because I talk about that all day long. Could have, based on my description. I was very traumatized by the break he had. It wasn't just rage. Well, and again, when I had BPD, I never had a psychotic break. But people with BPD can have that transient psychosis or it's more or less transient paranoia. But to listen to people talk about, particularly women with BPD today, you'd think that this is what they're all the same. They all have this to the severe nines. They all do this all day long, right? Which isn't true. So, and people, there can be a psychotic break within BPD that doesn't have to mean some other diagnosis or whatever, if it's transient, etc. But I've experienced that with a few clients, but I've never experienced it myself. But that doesn't mean anything anymore. Because one thing I know for sure right now, I can't go into the whole breadth and depth and width of it. I wish I could share it, but it just doesn't work on this platform. But the bottom line is, when I had BPD and when I was in treatment all those years and 3 decades plus ago, and even when I got online and up until about, I don't know, it's an arbitrary number I pick right now, like 2005 to 2010, something like that, everything changed. Not only with people's narratives, but a lot of people with BPD, their behavior and what was being reported. And then this mass, continued, let's pathologize and study all this stuff about BPD. Well, I see the papers coming in my email every day, and it's like, what the hell are they doing with this? Why are they doing that? Because if they would put just 5% of the effort into what many of us out here already know is the way to heal and recover from BPD, and that many professionals know, and they won't map the quote cure unquote that nobody needs from psychiatry. Let me make that clear, because they're in big business. It's a big business. I'm not saying every psychiatrist is like this, but the profession as a whole, as Dr. Noel McLaren said to me years ago, is driving itself off a cliff, and would that it would hurry up and get to the other side of the cliff, frankly. And that's not every psychiatrist, okay? But it's systemic psychiatry. And, so all I can say is, what I'm saying about this is, when you are a codependent, when you need to focus on yourself, when you need to learn how to do that, when you need to get out of these relationships, because no, these people are not healthy no matter what's going on, no matter how severe it is or it isn't. Bottom line is, layering the meaning of the narratives of some out there, using words like it's thought that, it seems like, it might be, wherein this whole thing comes forth from the APA with no frickin' proof. Like what Dr. Marsha Linehan has done with DBT. In a brief 26-minute video, she explains and talks about studies and talks about things that seem like they flow together. Psychiatry doesn't have, well, the APA specifically, doesn't have that going on. And and it's not from my past that I have a beef with psychiatry. It's the ongoing nature of what they're actually doing to people that, rather than as a system, as a group, as an institution, the APA, rather than focus on really trying to help people with BPD heal, no, they'd rather make money, drug them up, complicate it all, give them more problems. It's all in the wrong direction. And why is it that it's known? And like a UK agency said this, but it's known, period, that Psychiatric medication is counterindicated in the treatment of borderline personality. You try finding yourself a borderline today that isn't on a boatload of meds. What is going on? It's not ethical. It's not reasonable. Nor is it to think that somebody with BPD today has 10 different frickin' disorders. I'm not saying they don't have more going on than ever before, but that would be from the psychiatric meds. As well as, what BPD really is and how that comes about, which they don't have the nines on either. Oh, I know earlier I was going to say there's some psychiatrist running around like a baboon, he's not a leading, he's not important, but he says somewhere out there that BPD is 55% heritable. Well, that's amazing for lack of science. Prove that to me, and maybe I'll consider it. Prove it. They can't prove anything. Alicia, ultimately, it's more fruitful to unravel how on earth I have this trail of dysfunctional relating with myself and others. Well, yeah, and another thing about BPD that's really true for men and women with it, it's relational trauma. So it becomes a relational impossibility and like more or less a relational disorder because And van der Kolk has studied this, but van der Kolk doesn't push hard enough. If he's got suave, if he's got power, and people that he works with and studies with, then why don't they ram it down psychiatry's throat? Because guess what? Even though he's doing a lot of studying and a lot of pioneering that really is in the right direction, but he can't make psychiatry hear him. And he's not alone in his work, but I'm just saying there's a professional who's got clout and power, but oh no, nobody's got the clout and the power of that little inner power group of maniacal, APA, the ones that write the DSM-5. I mean the DSM. By the way, the ICD is much more informative, always has been, and the rest of the world is doing better. Alicia, I tried listening to, him, but it's so wordy. Well, and it's like that for a reason, right? Because it's self-aggrandization before your ease of understanding, right? You said, plus I'm not really trying to get a digital degree in this. Well, he's got several of those, I think, or tried to, or maybe not. But, there's a couple other YouTubers out there that like to talk like him. It's like, and I'm not saying my IQ is as high as his. Don't think it's like super lower, but I don't think it's where his is or whatever. But the point is, I have to look up the odd word, but it's not like I can't follow. And there are Swiss cheese holes in there. But the more he says it, the faster he says it, the stronger he says it, the more he's just, quote, being God for everybody, unquote. His latest video, everybody should go watch it. It's like basically where he tells you are slaves at his feet. With a little bit of crazy music in the back. And he's just playing, And as a malignant narcissist, psychopath, that's what he wants to do after all, is just play. You should really watch that because it really is, he kind of really gives it all away right there. But then, hey, not news to me. I'm not saying that he doesn't say some things, that, especially narcissism, etc. Yeah. And even in part of that video on the other, he said a lot of things that are really grounded. He knows what he's talking about in a lot of ways. But then there's the other times and the contradictions and the Swiss cheese holes that are there often. I'm not saying always. And it's true. That's a good way to put it, Alicia. More than me just saying, do people just want to hear what they want to hear? Are people trying to get a degree, a digital degree, and expertise in borderline personality or whatever, whoever hurt you? No, the goal should be really to heal and move forward. Wheels, the way wanting to end... Sorry, did I miss something? The way wanting to end and the people that feel the way they are treated is horrible. So much will for ignorance and solutions that are worse than the problem. Often. And for people with codependency as well, that if you get too up into certain narratives, erroneous as heck narratives or narratives that go too far without, because psychiatry's gone too far, without taking the time to, like, psychiatry isn't a science anyway, and neither is psychology. They're not pure sciences. So there's always going to be that reality right there. But psychiatry doesn't like to admit that or something. God, my birthday is later this month. Have a feeling the ex will hoover. But then she, quote, forgot, unquote, it last year until a week later. Maybe I'm wanting to see if she will. Shouldn't feel this way about my birthday. Well, and again, it's hard, I understand, but it's like what people have to keep asking themselves, wherever they are in this journey or getting, past the relationship and healing, is why are you focused on that? Because that is something that might not feel like a choice, but it is a choice whether you focus on that or not. Somebody asked in a comment on the channel today, something, I can't remember which video, and then they said, but I just want to know if, like, she's going to come back to me when she's done with the other guy, because, like, I'm curious, and, and I'm like, why? I know it's compelling, but this is the stuff that blocks people, not the stuff that helps people. Wheels, it makes me so angry. Yeah, well, it can get to me that way, too. I just get passionate about it. Because it happens in all kinds of ways. It's not just quote, mental health, unquote, or psychiatry, or whatever. And there are other people out there, too, and I've encountered them and one where I saw this video on Facebook, and, they're pioneering something in this area, which, again, I still don't see the justification for it. So, except they do see BPD through the lens of trauma, which is important. Because, humanistic, like, I'm into humanistic psychology, right? That's what I practice. Because the human context matters so much. This is what's lacking in all this, like, up the yin-yang, quote, studies. Like, just because they do these studies with their credentials, you think that makes it science? You think that they have the evidence because they say blah, 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 blah? They don't. They come out with flawed ideology and then they just say it like it's truth. And then they got people diagnosed with BPD, women, with BPD subtype ASPD, and these women accept that? Why? Why? Alicia, I'm really rooting for not entertaining this dynamic ever again. I'm on my way. Good for you. Alicia, it would be lovely to chalk it up to, quote, offness, unquote, and move along. However, in my case, the codependency runs deep. Yes. We can't just move along without going through the process. And you said my learning now is about reminding myself that my flimsy boundaries and avoiding responsibility is hurting me. Well, it's tremendous insight that you have. And Rab, listen to AJ. The Hoover will do nothing for you. Any feeling of euphoria is short-lived. I got Hoovered on my last birthday and just delayed my healing. Yeah, well, people listen to Rab on that. There's somebody who's experienced it. And by the way, when I had BPD, I never Hoovered anybody. And I was in a 10 to 13, I can't remember, year relationship. And I never cheated on anybody. I never ghosted anybody. I never Hoovered anybody. I never stalked anybody. I'm not saying I was a saint. I mean, I had the issues that I had. But, like, good God, compared to what's going on today? Seriously. I mean, and psychiatry with a hegemony of Big Pharma, they're handing out the meds, aren't they? And then what are the meds doing? And if you don't want to take my word for this, like, and why should you? Go look at the Facebook groups. Just go to Facebook and look up psychiatric survivor. Or, there's so many people. There's like thousands, if not more people, in all these Facebook groups about, how they can't get off certain psych meds. And these psych meds damage. I mean, like going back to Robert Whitaker's book, Anatomy of an Epidemic, speaking about the epidemic being psych meds. He said, quote, There is no chemical imbalance in the brain until and unless you take psychiatric medication, unquote. So, and I have, like, that's one thing, but there's way more sources and people out there. I've been compiling things because one day I'm just going to put them all in a video series and just like, I mean, there are other clinicians out there that say what I say. There are other programs out there that acknowledge the healing and recovery from borderline personality, that it's possible that people are doing it. Not enough are seeking treatment, but people can heal and recover. So for every voice out there, be it some hack on YouTube that doesn't know what they're talking about, I'm not saying that about him, I'm not saying he's a hack, but others are, and or be it whomever, like, there are organizations, agencies, and clinicians who know that people with BPD can heal and recover. And nobody is waiting for the APA's, quote, cure, unquote, that's never coming. And you don't have to cure something that is ill-defined and over-pathologized in the first place. You need to heal and recover from it. You don't need to cure it. Alicia, I've had a long history of making excuses for this nonsense. Trauma bonding is pretty much all I've known in experience, so I'm sorry to hear that. Glob, oh, I hear you, AJ. The ex was on multiple psych meds, painkillers, etc. That was in her mind, quote, fixing, unquote, her BPD. I know, and it's atrocity what's happening, because these people are given this stuff and maybe they're told that, or maybe they just get that inference themselves. But what I know, and from my journey, and because I did heal and fully recover from BPD, is I never took the psych meds. What's that tell you? And I'm not the only person who's recovered, but I'm just saying. I never took them. And I mean, I had to argue. I was 17 years old and I had to stand up and argue with shrinks. I'm just lucky I had a dark triad father that these men didn't scare me. I didn't care what their power or authority supposedly was. Because underline supposedly. And then when I keep saying no to the meds and they would threaten me with this, that, and the other and be emotionally blackmailing me, they'd freaking re-abuse me because I wouldn't take the bloody meds. And one by one, like, I would just walk away from them. I'm like, it was pathetic. And it's even worse today. Why do people go in trusting them? Because they're not, like, I'm sure there's some good shrinks out there, but my advice to people, if anybody listens with BPD today, get your therapy from a DBT program, get it from a psychologist, get it from a social worker, get it from a psychiatric nurse if you can find one. But don't go to a flippin' psychiatrist. Walk out with a prescription pad, and then your brain's going to be changed in a not positive way, perhaps forever. And by the way, the psychiatric meds do not help. What they do is they impede the already impeded ability for people with BPD to gain more insight and awareness that they need to be able to go into therapy and work on and gain more of, to be able to work forward and to learn a lot and to be healing and growing and to recover and to finding that lost self. I saw something out there earlier today when I was looking at something on the internet there, and it was like, one of those inpatient recovery uber expensive things in the U.S. said that you can really be, like, people with BPD can recover or mostly recover or whatever in a year of their treatment. Yeah, right. Okay, whatever. Rav, would that was true. You know what I'm saying? AJ, have you ever seen the interview Matt Lauer had with Tom Cruise? Yes, I have. It was so heated, and Tom Cruise was passionate about the dangers of psych meds. Well, yeah, because I remember the first time I saw that. Maybe it was quite an older interview, isn't it? I don't know. And then I thought, well, because I think Tom Cruise is a bit of a jerk himself, probably a narcissist, who knows. But of course, he's a Scientologist, so don't even get me started, because whatever. But the bottom line is, no, I watched it again. It was maybe, 4 or 6 months ago. And for all the wrong reasons is what I would say about Tom Cruise. But he's absolutely right. But does he know the actual... I mean, he does seem to know a lot about it. But I think more than anything, it comes from his Scientologist background belief, which is fine. But like, yeah. So anyway, no, I mean, I totally agree with what he says there. And and you can't, I don't know what I think about Tom Cruise, because I don't really think about Tom Cruise, but you can't really blame a celebrity or whatever that means anymore, when they've had it with an interviewer. And by the way, that reminds me, if anybody cares at all what Jordan Peterson has brought to the world, to the discourse, to the public square, so to speak, to the arena, I think Jordan Peterson is a very, like anyone else, fallible person and not perfect. And I don't agree with everything he says. But like, there was a New York Times article recently, Sunday Times, sorry, and I read it, and I'm like, wow, they're vilifying this guy. What's up with this? And I was like, huh. And then I went over to his YouTube channel, and I don't know why they don't just put a picture up there, like of him and his daughter or something, but it's black screen. But they were smart enough to have recorded the interview. And then if you read the article first and then you go listen to the interview, it's a hatchet job. It's just unbelievable. And then I don't know if Jordan Peterson is really back to himself yet, because in that interview, several places, like the part I heard so far, it was all his daughter speaking. But they're trying to figure out, you can tell that his daughter's like trying to trust this quote journalist, unquote, and then not sure if she should, and is answering questions. And in the middle of answering questions, this woman is like an attack dog, trying to pick out snippets of what she said. Well, that's not how you hear somebody's story, to be factually correct and write something that reflects what journalism is dead. We know that. But what journalism used to be about was really hearing the story that you're reporting on to really accurately write about it. And everybody, if you read the Times article, which I think is like in the last week or two, on Jordan Peterson, then go listen on his channel to the 2+ hours of the idiot that calls himself a quote journalist. I shouldn't be throwing words around like I am today, but these things really, really just peeve me off. And then never mind. Secondary, there's guys over there going, well, most women don't even, There's a lot of women. There's like thousands of comments over there. And when I saw lots of comments from women, and I added my own, and then somebody wrote under mine something. They were trying to introduce girls to him, and I'm like, well, I don't know how old you are, dude, but we're not all girls. Anyway, that was just an aside. But this is the kind of world we live in, right? Like, it's post-fact, post-truth, and everything is about how can you get somebody. And so, the thing with Peterson is one thing, right? And then, because people think he's so ultra-right, and so the left goes at him like crazy. And I guess he probably is a little bit right of center, because he calls himself a classic British liberal, which, if you ask British people what that means, it's not liberal that we know in North America. So, which isn't lily white either. But, so then I would tie that back in by just saying the same thing is happening with the studies in the pseudoscience of the APA, mostly funded by Big Pharma. There's incredible bias going into them, and sometimes they come up with meds, and then they do a study to, like, maneuver it somehow, allegedly, I'll say, so that they can use that new med, you know what I'm saying? Like, this stuff is just not way out there. It might sound like it, but it isn't. People should research it. Alicia, there's still the, quote, parent protection program, unquote, in our culture and other cultures, so family of origin inquiry is too taboo. Pills keep parents off the hook more than we like to admit. Well, yeah, and I saw, I don't remember what else I saw the other day. But I went by something. I know I got a book, put in a playlist to watch later. But something from psychiatry about the idea that, we can't blame the parents. Like, I'm like, excuse me, when they're cluster B, unfortunately, like, we can blame the parents. Because, I mean, you shouldn't do that for your whole life or anything, but I'm just saying, It's like with my parents. Well, thank you very much. I mean, I got through it and I'm stronger because of all of it. But bottom line is, you know, like seriously, you got to get a license to hunt. You have to have a license for a lot of things or to fish, but you don't have to have a license to raise a child. Like something really wrong with it. I don't know how we'd ever, but there's so many, like if people were subjected to assessments before they were able to be parents, which is no way to police that, there'd be a lot of people who have had kids that are now in the system and or wanting to take their own lives and are diagnosed with something in cluster B. Or other things, because there are other issues in life besides just the cluster B ones. But, revisionist history coming along already to say it's not faulty parenting. I mean, albeit that psychiatry or whoever it was, because why is psychiatry involved with autism? I don't understand. It's not a mental, not a personality disorder. It's not a mental health issue. So, but they used to say way back in the 50s, 60s, I don't know, that autism was caused by a refrigerator mother. Well, okay, so that was really wrong. But if you got a cluster B parent, then the trauma you're going to go through, the likelihood that people will end up with BPD and diagnosed with that and then have to work their way through that and heal from that, like I did, gets exponentially higher. It has nothing to do with, or even if it has a little bit to do with, who knows. But so far, what psychiatry has always said, the APA, in BPD, it's a sensitive temperament that meets with an invalidating environment, and boom, because nobody has the answer on if it's in the genes or not. And even if it is, so let's say it is, you still need the invalidating environment and the abuse and the not being nurtured through the early stages of childhood development probably to kick it off. So to me, it's just a dead argument that doesn't matter. But that's what psychiatry loves to play with, dead arguments that don't matter. Natalie, I admire that you stood up for yourself at 17. I only recently started to stand up for myself. Not easy, but I'm doing better than I thought. Well, good for you. And Alicia, in all the jobs I've had, my performance was reviewed and evaluated. But the parent role is somehow immune to scrutiny. I know. And then now, like you said, there's sort of this, parent protection program out there. And, it's... When parents are at fault because they're shitty parents, that's what is. It is what is. But obviously people need to, get into healing, recovery, move forward, and not be blaming parents for a lifetime, because that's no way to live. But the fact is, where does it originate? Well, yeah, there, except for a very small percentage in those who go on to have BPD. But, the other thing I'm really aware of is, like, people are always talking about cluster B, cluster B, cluster B, and everybody thinks everybody is one, and maybe lots of people get that right. But when they're not diagnosed, you don't really know that. And there's so many other factors, and just trauma in childhood, right? Like, it's not always cluster B, and yet you'd think, I know it's what my channel focuses on too, but like, I don't like it. I don't like the language. I don't like the narrow tunnel of focus that other people require me to talk in to do videos that they want to watch. Again, which is like, sometimes I just say what I want to say, but basically there's a narrative out there and people want to hear what they want to hear. And I'm questioning that really strongly now because, like when I was growing up, I had dark triad father, comorbid BPD, NPD mother. What if I just wanted to hear what I wanted to hear? Would that have been like a therapist saying, yeah, they're horrible? Yeah, you're right. They're horrible. Yeah, you're right. They failed you. That wouldn't help me, would it? By the way, I don't think a therapist ever said that to me because it wasn't the point. And Alicia said, no one said you have to prosecute necessarily. But what happens is the product of the environment will be blamed. Yes. Well, as many of us have been the scapegoats, right? And I mean, and then, if they have BPD untreated, maybe, but also narcissists, I mean, are they going to take responsibility for anything? Of course not. Like, I had my father saying things like, when I'd ask him to stop, I beg him, scream at him to stop hitting me. Why are you hitting me? He's like, well, you deserve it. And it's like, well, like, because whatever his lack of reasoning there was, whatever I was doing that he felt out of control with, like, you know what I'm saying. There's just no rhyme or reason there. And Alicia, my parents would actually blame me for being a poor parent to them. Well, yeah. Why wouldn't they, since that was my role as a parentified child? I think this is common. Well, yeah, and I mean, the fact that they said that, wow, it's almost like they had insight that they just couldn't take another step forward with. But, it always fascinates me on these live streams when you come out to say something that people don't want to hear. Wow, there aren't a lot of people hanging around to hear it. I'm just saying. So, but if I do a stream, like if I turn around and say I ended this stream like any minute, and then I went and put up a new title and started a new stream about something really anti-BPD totally, then yeah, there'd be double the people here and whatnot. So this is what I mean by people wanting to hear what they want to hear, the narrative out there. And, people with codependency are victimized, so I'm not being smart with the title. There is victimization there, as there is with people that have BPD or NPD have been very victimized in childhood, too. So, although somebody's getting quite creative with how that happens, etc., etc. But, there's a YouTuber who appears right now to have walked away from their main channel to stop talking about narcissistic personality disorder, who I really liked what they said in another video the other day, because this is the way that I think too, is like, what is a personality disorder? Because it infers that other people's personalities are ordered. And it's like, so anyway, I won't go into that right here because it's popular as mud, but mental illness is a total false construct. Doesn't mean that what these people are doing and what's the issues they have and the challenges they have and the relational impossibility and the fact that they hurt and wound and traumatize others. Yeah, that's all true. Doesn't matter the lens you look at it through. It's all true. So, and the fact that one person is abused in childhood, gets annihilated, is not any excuse for them to do that to anybody else at any other point in life. Abuse is never right. And the other thing, that's one of the absolutes we can use the word never with for sure. And abuse isn't love. But what I see codependents struggling with so much, and I'm sure I had my own struggle with it many decades ago, is just how to get out of the victim role and narrative, which is true, which has happened to you. And how to, want to get out of that role and become a survivor more than you want to vilify the borderline or the narcissist or whoever, and more than you want to keep hearing these layered narratives out there that just aren't factual or accurate. So, and I'm not here to say, so I have all the facts and the accurate in terms of what's up in the air that's not proven, but that's put out there as if it is. And then more to the point, I would simply say to people with codependency, and when you've been with somebody with BPD or you have parents and or a relationship with a cluster B, why are you still focusing on all the things that people can say about them instead of all the information out there that you now need? Well, and I know the answer to that. It's because many people are still running from their own pain and woundedness that it's been added to by a borderline or a narcissist. And this idea that they can't get closure. And then I could ask the question just generally, because I'm not trying to, quote, blame any codependent victims, because people are victimized. But what is this drive to sort of continue unknowingly to stay in the victim role of giving these flippin' borderlines and narcissists so much bloody power? They are wounded, weak, hurting, lacking self. Narcissists have no self. It's a stronger false self. Borderlines have no self. It's a false self. Untreated, right? And the thing is, so why do people give them so much bloody power all day long? I mean, that's something that I continue to try to talk about, because the minute you know what's going on, or you suspect it enough, and or you see the correlation to your childhood in one way or another, and how you were originally traumatized to whatever degree, then it's like, I know about, the trauma bond and all the other stuff, but why are people? Well, the answer is the patterns. Repetition, compulsion cycles, and codependency, where the self just comes last. The self comes last. The self comes last. But why aren't people availing themselves of not only what I say on that, but what other people might say about that? Because you got to come first. You got to come first. You got to work through the guilt. You got to work through the shame. You got to work through the stuff. Or you're going to remain a victim, and you're going to keep listening to this ridiculous narrative out there, narratives being layered on top of narratives, where other people are feeding to you the meaning that they say you should ascribe to what really traumatized and hurt you. And that's not what I'm here to do. I'm here to do the opposite, which makes me oh so not popular. Who cares? Alicia, I discovered that focusing on how this whole thing of personality is functioning within the whole, there's more clarity in that. Wow. Okay. That's a little confusing. You said I still get tantrumy and fall back into my story and how pissed I am about my past treatment, but that's what it is too. Well, yeah, and I mean, when people are in a healing recovery journey, it's not a straight line. So, and it's a lot to deal with and a lot to process. But I just think that it's way past time, that people who've been hurt by somebody, especially, I hate to say it, but especially, well, lesbian women are hurt by borderline women too. But men who've been hurt by borderline women, I hear them, and I work with people, and I'm very empathic, don't get me wrong. But there comes a point where, and right now I'm not talking about how I work with people, or, I'm not questioning anybody's experience. I never would. The message is, and I don't believe what's in the middle of my quote. The thumbnail, it says, don't waste your time with explanations. People only hear what they want to hear. Well, I don't feel like I'm wasting my time, but I feel like this is what I've really discovered recently. And that this is another reason why people go watch, Backman, and people can go watch them all day long if they want. But what I'm clearly setting a boundary around here is, don't come back to me and ask me what I think about it. I get asked about this YouTuber, that YouTuber, this information. I don't know what that's about, other than that I'm a straight shooter. But if you're going to go listen and identify and take on the narrative that a YouTuber's laying down for you to take on, then don't come to me to help you ferret it. I mean, if you want to book sessions, I'll help you ferret it out. But on a live stream, don't come to me with it, because I'm fed up with it. I'm not here to shovel other people's shit out of your way. That's actually your job, if in fact you've fallen prey to that as well, because there's a lot of it out there. So anyway, I'm passionate about this. And I'm not even saying that in that video I watched that he had everything wrong. No, he didn't. Not at all. But again, he's leaning heavily on what are the big clickbait aspects of the information that is not established, that is not known, that is not in evidence. But it's oh so pushed out there by psychiatry, the APA specifically. While other areas in the world are working as hard, if not harder, than the APA pathologizing pseudoscience, mumbo-jumbo, whatever-like machine, they're working equally as hard to change these narratives. And that is what I'm trying to do too, but not in a way that ever questions someone's experience. So, but you just notice how quick people have come and gone from this stream. And it doesn't surprise me. I mean, I figured that is exactly what would happen if anybody even stayed or showed up in the first place. And yet, so, I think about it. And, yeah, I was pretty passionate in the beginning. And I do get fed up on this platform. Because, it's not about me being all right in the world and the world being all wrong. It's because there's lots of other YouTubers out there who do a really good job in their own ways and whatever information they're talking about. but they will layer, like, why don't I do more videos? Watch, I'll probably end up doing them. I don't want to. 3 reasons the borderline blah 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 blah. 6 reasons, I did the 10 whatever. Like, it's what people want to hear. But what I really know is that what people want to hear isn't what's best for them. But I can't say that. Like, I can't tell you, well, if you want to hear person A, thing A, misinformation over here, or even good information, but that's layering down a narrative on top of something, well, it's not good information when it's speculated. It's speculative. And that's all this stuff is about. Women with BPD having secondary psychopathy. It's just speculation at this point. So if they could ever prove it, more to the point though, common sense, common sense says to me, like, there would be no difference, no humongous variant based on gender. If somebody's a psychopath, they should be able to be assessed and diagnosed as a frickin' psychopath, not run through BPD. And the fact that they only say it of women, when men with BPD, higher percentages of men, not all, with BPD, more so than women with BPD, are doing much more, causing much more devastation to their partners, be they gay males or women, than women are to men or to lesbian women. Now, of course, I'm not saying across the board, there's always individual situations, right? And yet, they're not screaming that these borderline men have the variant of ASPD. I think at some level in all of this, there has to be some kind of, consternation on the part of some people in power with this stuff, that why is it that most psychopaths really are male? But what's happening and how people are being women with BPD being massively failed right now, and anybody who has interest in them getting into recovery and actually finding their way through, they're being massively failed with this idea, like even the ones that might well fit a diagnosis for a psychopath. So it is what we're facing here, because this is what I thought. I haven't checked on it, but my thought is that the hair scale for psychopathy is simply male-oriented. Just as we see in autism, still, to this day, there, to my knowledge, now there could be something that's brand new out there, but women with Asperger's, which I still will refer to it as, women with what psychiatry now calls, why is psychiatry involved in autism at all? Psychiatry calls ASD level 1 in the DSM-5, because they felt like it, right? Because they changed it, they took one category out, they shoved it all into an autism spectrum disorder kind of scenario, and they shouldn't even have their paws on it. But the same thing is true and has been forever for autism. The diagnostic assessment tools are for males only. Why do so many females get missed and have their lives screwed around with that way? Because I didn't find out till I was 40. Thank you very much. Could have used to know that when I was about 4. Because they just will not create, and put into place assessment scales for females for psychopathy and for autism, apparently. So let's run it through BPD. And then now, what do YouTubers do with it and people disseminating supposed information? They don't parse anything. They don't delineate anything. Every woman with BPD is not the same. And every man with BPD is not the same. But men and women with BPD are not that dissimilar in the core of it all at all. So it's like, and every female, this is what I objected to in Backman's video too. Every female, this is just the inference, the implication, the way it's said, is the same with BPD. And it's just a narrative out there now, whether it's about secondary psychopathy or whatever. It's like, they're not, all people with BPD are just not the frickin' same. They're not all untreated. Many of them are on the road. They've been in therapy for a while. They're doing well. They're learning. They're changing. They're growing. Many have healed and recovered. And we still have idiots out there who go, oh, but people at BPD can't recover. And when they recover, I'm talking about idiots on YouTube, don't know anything, just talking, right? And they'll say, but they still split, and they still do this, and they have to nah, 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 nah. And the other thing is, and the same source of that nonsense, not that there's just one, says it only borderline split. Meanwhile, narcissists split too, but like, hey, why split hairs over accuracy, right? There are a lot of people out there getting re-traumatized by some people. And I know that, but nothing I can do about it. And it's their choice to do so. And Alicia said, you're going to appreciate this question. What is splitting? Can you describe it? Well, actually, it's I've described it before. Not a short thing to describe. But in essence, it is the major, this is one thing Backman said in his video, he was right. It is the major defense mechanism, as he said correctly, in BPD and in NPD. Not that it's exactly the same in both. Then you said, I don't understand how it would be a defense mechanism. I must not know what it means. Well, yeah, and more to the point, that goes into the in-depth of what clinicians need to know to treat people. Do people need to know this to recover from codependency? I don't know. People seem to think they need to know it. I've talked about it before. When an infant is not having their needs met, and if there's misattunement, affect synchrony, not the appropriate mirroring that is required for the neurological healthy development of that otherwise really not developed brain when we're infants, it's wired in regard to the need to connect, because the need to connect equals survival. And so somewhere in the infancy process or early toddlerhood, as the child is continually, like babies don't know this, but what they're seeing is they're not seeing what they need to see. So that registers in the biology, and it brings up this threatens the infant reacts to biologically a threat to biological survival. That's all there is at that point. There's no cognition, there's no rationalization, there's no, hey, wait a minute, there's no vocalization. So it is that this lack of what infants need in childhood to survive and to thrive and to be able to go through the stages of early childhood development in a healthy way, or just, bumpy like a lot of kids, but get out of it without a cluster B diagnosis and all that trauma. So it starts with the infant on a biological level mounting a cry, which is usually when an infant is screaming, to bring, because need. But the infant that doesn't get the mirroring back it needs, it's a threat to biological survival. And then as a child gets older, and by the age of 2, it's taken away the emotional survival of that otherwise burgeoning authentic self. What happens in the middle there is that the child ego state fragments away from the rest of what's left. So it's a fragmented ego, but it's not dissociative identity disorder. And so that's the first splitting happens in that process of the loss of self. The fragmentation off of what is a part of ego, a part of self, is gone by the age of 2. So splitting begins with an infant essentially setting all of this stuff aside, like an angry face, like a stressed out mother, but the way that that's perceived, have to use language really carefully, because it's every time that an infant has a biological arousal of survival instinct mechanism that will start to chip away at what becomes, somewhere in that process and before or by the age of 2, the first split, where there should have been connection and bonding, there's a split instead. And the split happens and this is hard to talk about because the words aren't really correct with it, because the infant doesn't know this. But when mother shows up 1 minute as like terrifying and threats of survival on a biological level, and then might show up in some kind of other way, then what is an infant? And it's not done in like a cognitive way, but it's what's set aside versus what can be taken in by an infant, and it creates a split right there. There's a good mom and a bad mom, because the infant needs mom for survival, period, no matter what is going on. But I can't. I'm trying to explain it without using misappropriated language that the infant doesn't know. The splitting starts in infancy. Let me just put it that way. And it's a defense initially to the threat to literal biological survival by an infant. So that's the best way I could put it. Sarah, splitting is something I experience too much. They love you, they hate you. Well, they don't really ever love you, but yeah. And they're good, they're bad. They're bad. I hear they are bad and they are bad. Their personality. I don't know what that means there. Sorry. Alicia, I can feel that there are clearly unfavorable things about people I care about. So I have a quote good unquote and a bad quote bad unquote trait category. But it's what I like and don't like. How is splitting different than that? I think I just spoke to that. It's when splitting threatens one's biological survival in infancy. It's when and then all splits after that are going to be part of that, and a trigger back to, as more meaning gets layered on as a kid gets older, to be able to think and have cognition. More importantly, to just be feeling, be like feeling so much, and then putting whatever words they put to the feelings. Splitting is way different than that, because it's such a primal defense mechanism that like it starts before cognition and verbal. It starts, so it's automatically ingrained already, and it's not like people can think about it the way you're thinking about what isn't really a split. You're just talking about dichotomous thinking, which splitting is way more in BPD than dichotomous thinking. I mean, dichotomous thinking comes out of it, or people think that's what drives it, but it's a much more ingrained repetition compulsion of a traumatic experience. So it's very like automatically happening over and over and over again for people with BPD. I don't know, Alicia. I don't know about that. You said, well, now that you're speaking to it, my preferences don't feel dire about the characteristics of people. And he said, thanks, I just didn't understand why it was so threatening. The amping up of it was wild. Well, it's a primal, infantile, narcissistic defense is what splitting is. And it begins in that stage of life. And so it's much more in depth and damaging, and it is part and parcel of what the arrested and the lost self, why that comes about. So it's a very primal defense mechanism, and this is why people with BPD can't love, can't attach, untreated, can't love, can't attach. Their communication is, they have deficits. It's dysfunctional. It's why it drives so much of why they do what they do. But they are usually the last people to know about that, unless they get into treatment. So, it's like life and death for them every second is what it is. And then this primal response kicks in because it's in their unconscious, and it's a repetition compulsion, and it's not like they have time to think about it. They just get flooded emotionally, triggered back to that to varying degrees. Not always does a trigger go all the way back to the primal, but the splitting, this is why they can't trust either, by the way, and they have a loss of self. which I still see people talking about, although, what's his face hit on that too. I'm not saying it was erroneous about that, except that when he started fusing it with that identity diffusion, it's not identity diffusion. That's what's in DID. Identity diffusion isn't part of BPD. In BPD, the identity is gone. The self is gone. Just like in narcissistic personality disorder. And the false self rises up. And it's an arrested, emotional, developed self. For people with BPD by the age of 2, and narcissists, there's many theories out there between the ages of 3 to 5. And so different stages mean for different kind. This is why narcissists have much more, don't have empathy, don't feel much, except for the fragile whatever, But this is why they have much more formidable defense mechanisms. And then I think, there was something else that Bachman said there that was really erroneous, but I guess it's going to slip out of my mind now. Oh yeah, but then in another video, not the same video, was it another video? I think it was, where he harkened back again to BPD, and he contradicts himself from video to video, because then at one point he said about how the borderline feels like they have no skin, and the emotional dysregulation and the abundance of feelings that the narcissist doesn't have. And so he got that pretty accurate, but that was in a different video. And it's like, so how can you say that 1 minute and say this other stuff the other minute? And I'm not saying he's making it up. Like, it's out there in flawed ideology. It's not out there in fact or in any knowing way. And the first video that he talked about, another video he talked about BPD and DID, he was very much sounding authoritative. And this last video I watched was the thinking is, it seems like. And so even though he had all the bravado about, all the reaction he caused, which, gave him what? All the narc supply he's always after, then his language wasn't so ipso facto authoritative for sure. Just in the very different words he used. But to those who are fans of his, there's nothing I can do to help you. Yeah, but if you're trying to explain that to your parents, they're not going to get it. Oh, you said that went well? You think? No, maybe it didn't go so well. Ryan, I can remember flipping from love to hatred toward the adults in my life when I felt frightened or hurt by them growing up. Like you say, a primal feeling of rage, not just regular anger. And you said, now that I'm self-aware, it's disturbing to notice in myself. Well, just know, Ryan, I mean, I don't know where you are in your journey, but you probably need to know a little more about what yourself really means, because, now that you're more self-aware, I mean, yeah, disturbing to notice in yourself, I can understand that, but you have to really, learn to be more nurturing to the self that you're starting to understand and be aware of, because, these are not choices that people with BPD make. Not that maybe they don't make other choices down the line, but, it's like, I was looking at an older video, it's not that old, video I did, December 2019, and it's just called AJ Mahari Raw and Real on BPD or something. And I was responding to somebody's comment with BPD, but it was like they were they were civil and it wasn't abusive. But what I was trying to point out there was, like, they don't believe they can get better. They believe the APA narrative. They were saying that I was bashing people with BPD and all this other stuff. And the thing is, like, there's sometimes videos I do I don't like, in the sense of they serve one side and they really can hurt people on the other side, and that's never my intent. But the thing is, there's a lot of explanation, I believe, in my videos that can help people with BPD as well. But, like what, what I'm talking about that, and when you would feel love, like, I'm not, love, people with BPD, when I should really say the whole thing. When I say they can't attach and they don't love, like in adult relationships, it's they don't love in a healthy, congruent, consistent, age-appropriate adult way, right? So there's always that kind of, and I mean this with the most respect, more childlike, younger kind of feeling of love, or certainly a desire to be loved, and yet that has to be healed within people with codependency to a degree, but people with BPD, to know the self and everything before you're going to be able to really put that out to people in a consistent way. But I remember the love-hate toward my parents when I was, probably it really got started. Everything gets worse when you hit puberty and adolescence, because you're changing, and it's another developmental stage that, like, if we've already been, like, they don't want to diagnose BPD till later, right? But if you've already had that experience, which you've had, Ryan, and I had, then when you hit adolescence, it's like, it doesn't happen the way, for people with BPD or about to be diagnosed with it later. Adolescence isn't the same as it is for other people in that regard too. So, but I remember the love-hate of my parents at that point. It was just, it was really, it was mostly hate, to tell you the truth, because there wasn't much intermittent reinforcement or back and forth even. So, but I just think people, who've been in relationships with borderlines or narcissists, and or are the adult child of one as well, or two, it's so important to just focus more on learning what it means to heal codependency and heal your own trauma. But, I guess people I believe are doing that, and people are getting there, but a lot of people aren't going to ever get there because they're so stuck in this other focus, which is the cluster B. And, so anyway, I think I've said enough on that. That's probably pretty obvious, or not to people, but whatever it is, it will remain said with different individuals. Alicia, I feel really sad when I think back to my childhood feelings that are still with me. I felt the need to attach to them so badly. Well, I hear you, and I can relate to that because so did I. We all will as kids. But, I remember I never knew what it was, but you could look back now, and when you don't really get to attach to them, it's very wounding, to put it mildly, right? And you said, I just didn't understand why we couldn't be mad at each other and still love each other. It's probably the most imprinted experience of wounding for me. Well, yeah. And it is for everyone. And then the other sort of, when that happens for somebody and they end up with codependency, that happens for somebody who ends up with codependency and BPD. And what's the difference, And I think the most obvious answer is perhaps it's degree of trauma, but it might have to do with a more resilient temperament versus a more sensitive temperament. But it also has to do with how much abuse there is and how much trauma there is as well. But this is a thing probably that people with codependency need to think more about, is how close, because codependency overlaps with BPD, so not the same, but how close for a lot of people with severe codependency they are to being more like somebody with BPD than not. I'm not saying that you are like that or exactly the same, but this is why the vilification of people with BPD, who definitely hurt people, lots of them, not all of them, tremendously, horribly. Well, but the vilification of them isn't going to help you heal. It just isn't. And, Aaron, I hear a lot about cluster B and quiet borderline, but don't know much about them. All I know is BPD diagnosis. Are there different types of BPD? Well, I think more than different types. The types are kind of like the manifestations of. So, quiet or classic acting out, or I never remember the four of them. The discouraged is the quiet borderline. Petulant is probably the classic acting out. And there's two other types I always forget. But in the types of borderline or people with BPD, it really is only referring to the presentation and manifestation, how it's going to be acted out or acted in or dealt with by somebody with BPD, because the types share the same common core woundedness and trauma. So that's the important thing to remember there. Alicia, my family turned into animals. Seriously. Well, you don't have to tell me about it. I know what that looks like. You said my codependency kept me safe because I avoided my parents' violence. My severe codependency kept my physical body safe. Well, yes, and I'm sure it was helping you emotionally as well. But like when we're kids and in environments like that, we don't have any control or power or autonomy. And so we definitely, the codependency and or whatever else happens in that process in childhood, it is, codependency is a heck of a defense on its own, in its own right. And that's something that, I want to talk more about and say more about. But, and this ties into rumination for people who could really learn to make choices to work on the rumination in many ways. But why don't they? Because it's a massive repetition compulsion of externalizing out and defense in codependency against basing self. Finding more of that because it isn't a totally lost self in codependency. Finding more of that self and creating that healthy relationship to and with self that isn't had by people with codependency unless until they work through the healing and recovery process, because you end up with a dysfunctional relationship to and with yourself because what was mirrored to you in childhood, right? You're pursuing and you're trying to get all those needs met, and if you got two cluster B parents like Alicia and like I did, one of them's bad enough, because the point is kids need what they need, and when it isn't coming, then it's going to be a gargantuan struggle. And the other thing too, that I don't know if people are studying it, but seems to be more of a correlative factor that is being talked about more, that I've certainly thought about more, that people with codependency, they don't all have cluster B parents, but I think more than we thought. And this again is anecdotal by clients I work with, and they don't all have a cluster B parent. But the thing is, to think that codependency has been so misunderstood, or maybe it'll end up being called something else, and God help us, help people if the APA gets a hold of it to pathologize it. But then they don't pathologize anything as hard as they do not only BPD, but specifically females with BPD in females, which you gotta stop and ask yourself at some point, what's up with that? Even if you've been traumatized by one, it's like, come on, really? Like, not that you're going to give them a break. You got to be with yourself and your own experience. But codependency is formidable trauma in its own right. And of course, it varies for different people. But I think people don't really realize that enough, Or at least at certain points they don't. And because codependency is, like you said, Alicia, its own survival pattern, if you will, or its own survival mechanism. And Glob, is there a significant difference in trauma formed in infancy as opposed to later in life? Oh, you bet. Yes, 100%. I can actually remember my life being healthy, secure, before living with my father around age 8 to 10. Well, and I mean, it could be that, as you progress through early childhood, infancy and early childhood, things were stable enough and you got through that in a healthy enough way, because nobody gets through it perfectly anyway. And then, you get this trauma or insecurity when you went to live with your father around 8 to 10. Could be that's where your codependency stems from right there. Because trauma is trauma throughout the life cycle, but never is it more impacting than in infancy and toddlerhood to people's lifetimes. And if you listen to the APA, I mean, borderline personality is not a life sentence unless somebody believes that they have to wait for the APA's never coming, quote, cure, unquote, or they believe that it's pathology up the yin-yang. So, and there are people with NPD, if they seek treatment, they can be helped. Maybe not the... I know, that's what Backman said. That in BPD, there's a lot of narcissism and grandiosity, too. No, wrong. There's some, and I've talked about this. I have a video out there, which I didn't enjoy doing, but it was a blog post I wrote years ago. It's called Pathological Narcissism in BPD. People should find that one and watch it, because there is narcissism in BPD, and there can be in some with BPD at times in an overcompensating way, so defense against how they feel so inferior and so underneath it all and so victimized, that they can once in a while have some grandiose defense and I've explained how that happens, and I'm going to be doing more video series on this. But the way he said that, to the extent he said that, was erroneous, because he's seeing it, the only way he can understand everything is through his own lens of malignant narcissism. And I'm sorry, but that was just, it's not the same as narcissistic personality grandiosity or their narcissism at all. Very much different levels. And, Alicia, my emotional landscape is that of an older child than my parents, but it feels like under 10ish, under stress especially. Well, yeah, because your parents are probably stuck back at like 2 and 3 emotionally, largely, if any more further ahead than that. Which, if you think about it, it's just another horrific aspect of being, well, not being raised, because we don't get raised by cluster B parents. We rather try to survive and endure it, right? Because they're all up in their own stuff, whether it's BPD or NPD. So, anyway, I just, feel passionate about what I feel passionate about. And sometimes I think to myself I should just stop talking about it, because I get a lot of flack. But, what can you do? And then, whoever people like to watch, whatever they like to hear, none of my business. I'm just trying to help people to have something else to think about that I truly believe is pretty on target about, codependence. Like I said, your experience is your experience. And in childhood, growing up with the ex, or the not yet ex, or the recycling around the circle with the, whatever. But again, it's the meaning and narrative that gets layered on top of that I believe takes people the exact opposite direction from where they need to go. Well, I've seen it. I don't just believe it. It happens to people. They're going in the exact opposite direction that would be the direction to recovery, and to knowing themselves, and to not focusing on the borderline or the narcissist, and to not be watching 60,000 of these videos of, I'm not saying there's something wrong with everybody's videos, like there isn't, but, I just think people really probably do need to watch a lot of different people, because you need to sort of, and then you need to ferret out what makes most sense, and some people might think that guy makes most sense, and it's like, okay, but good luck with that, because it's just, I don't know, do I have blinkers on, or do other people? It's hard to say, but to listen, and now he's got a video out there how everybody's his freaking slave. Like, this is who Vaknin is. And the other thing is, he sees narcissism in everything. He's projecting a ton all the time, and I just wouldn't want to get my information from a malignant narcissist psychopath. Call me weird, okay? I'll wear that weird banner with a lot of, well, never mind pride, but I'll just wear it with comfort and ease, thank you very much. And Alicia said, I thought I was so advanced emotionally. Well, being advanced emotionally is a journey, and it's first there's healing and recovery journeys for people, and then there's the life cycle of growing, And something I know as I get older, and people are, some young people, not all, but lots of people in I don't know, whatever the generation is before the millennials, but some millennials are really ardently ageist. Probably some Gen Xers are too, and I'm sure baby boomers are in reverse. But like, what was I gonna say about? Yeah, people think like somebody left a comment on another video of mine. It just keeps getting better. It wasn't a bad comment. It was just like, you gotta love. I think it was something like, you gotta love this. I saw it recently. I have just a memory. I mean, you gotta love this lady. No makeup, no something else. Dogs in the background, and then some information was right on, and it's like, I don't even know what to say to that, because this was, a video in where I wasn't having the medical flare-up situation, where they would have probably added that. But the point is, so what does all that mean, really? Because, yeah, I am not, like most other YouTubers, I'm not a slick marketer. I'm not going to have the plant behind me. I watched a video of somebody I haven't watched for quite a while now, who's kind of in that pack, in the narcissistic abuse recovery area, where 2 or 4 others have, I don't know, tripled their subscriptions into the 300,000s now. And this person is just barely over 100,000, which, they were all kind of together at one point. And so I went to see what they were talking about, and I just found it really sad, because this person is, I think, a really good person. Their information is as good as anybody else's, just like I believe mine is as good, if not a little bit more than some people's. But I don't get the views, and I can't get the platform to get bigger, and I don't care, except for if people would resonate with me and it would help, then I wish they could find me. But when I watched this person's video, it was like, I felt really sad for them, because they're trying so damn hard. In fact, they're trying too damn hard. And that's something I have to check with myself too. Sometimes I do try too damn hard, and then I end up hearing about it from, I don't mean to be referring to other YouTubers, because, but like, yeah, I'll try to find a bit, Vacton's Vacton, and it comes up, but I'll try to find a better way to just say what I gotta say without that, but in this case, it was impossible in the beginning. Hey there, Lottie. Bend, Oregon, awesome. Laugh out loud. Okay. To what? I have no idea. In what context? I have no idea. You know who somebody is who said what? I don't know what you're referring to. And if you're talking about the last comment that I was talking about or not, but I mean, wasn't a bad comment, it just is what it is. I don't know, people expect what everybody else is doing. I mean, Bacton doesn't do it either, but people expect the plant and the, slick look and the marketing and the, some people have had the plastic, what do you call it? Plastic, no. Yeah, plastic surgery. At least 1 or 2 that I've seen, and it's like, really, seriously? Okay, because... dog in the back. Oh, the person, I know who she is who said that. Oh, okay. Well, nothing wrong with what they said. And Lottie, yeah, I feel ageist behavior is very negative. When I was a child, I loved the elderly and old people in my house and neighborhood, like 93 and 85 and lots of 70-year-olds. I adored and respected them. Yeah, well... That respect factor went the way of the dodo bird some time ago. But, when I was a kid, a teenager, a young adult, I very much valued, listening to older people in certain subjects or whatever, and learning from them. And, and then it doesn't mean just because you're older you know everything and everything, but it just does make me laugh because, I guess today, especially, right? It's the way kids are being raised. It's all this digital nonsense and narcissistic culture. But people are like, yeah, like, you got to look perfect. You got to be this. You got to do... People just, again, it's like I'm always talking about the narratives of people. And they want to hear what they want to hear. Because the borderlines want to hear what they want to hear. And I don't think narcissists care. But codependents often want to hear what they want to hear. Not maybe what would benefit them to hear. And so it's like, and younger generations, and maybe people around my age, and maybe people not that much younger than me or older than me, have this attitude of like, it should be what I think it should be, and so that's all that I'm gonna, like, that, and if I see anything, hear anything different now, these are very rigid people, who have really closed minds. And so, but hey, I'm quite used to dealing with that in so many ways because I'm just not like that. And when you're not like that and you come up against, quote, like that, unquote, yeah, it isn't going to work out very well, one way or the other. So I just dismiss it and don't care. That's the best way to deal with it. And Lottie, I find it very upsetting, the ageism. Well, yeah, but look what's going on for, millennials and the generation down. Look what's going on. They can't decide if the biggest problem is toxic femininity or toxic masculinity or toxic this or toxic that. And more than ever before in any other generation, millennials to a degree and the next generation down, well, heterosexuals aren't really getting together so much in relationships and stuff because there's all this gender stuff going on, which there's been gender stuff going on forever, but it has its own iteration, meaning, background, etc. in each, I guess, generation. But unfortunately, it's not getting better, it's getting worse. So, I guess who knows what. Well, I think all differences come down to people, like with ageism, if they're younger, they just, it's something lacking in them, how they feel about themselves, is really where all this stuff goes back to. So, just saying. Natalie, when I started researching, I watched quite a few channels on BPD. Yours is the only one that I could really hear and understand what you were saying. Well, okay. I think, I don't think you mean hear in the literal sense, right? I'm glad, I just do what I do. And for some people it resonates, and for other people, I guess, off they go to malignant narcissists and psychopaths and others of the same ilk, but they're just not out and they're not that aware, if you know what I mean. And of course, there's a lot of other good people on YouTube. So I'm not, whenever I'm referring to this, I'm referring to but a few. There's a lot of good people out there, a lot of good information. Not so much in this particular area, but yes, there is other great information out there. And Lottie said, I can understand when it happened. I remember some people like listening to the stories and the kindness from them. It makes little sense. Well, I remember when it happened in my life, I'm a late stage baby boomer. So in the Cultural Revolution, I was like 4, 5, 6, 7. I wasn't part of it, but what was I going to say about that? Oh, yeah, baby boomers were the first to really super rebel against the older generation. So, I don't think it had happened prior to that. And so ageism probably started right there. But that would be with people that are 20 years older than me now. Or always were 20 years older than me. What am I saying? Well, I can't understand when it happened. I remember some people... Oh, and I read that. Then you said, makes a little sense. Older people have wonderful stories. I can't understand why that is not interesting for people. Yeah, I don't know. I saw a thing in just passing on YouTube, I don't know, sometime in last week, and I didn't look at it, but maybe it was one of those little, maybe I clicked on one of those story things. I don't remember where I saw it. Then I went by real quick. It was like, my grandmother survived a residential school, like in Canada, so an Indigenous person, survived the residential schools that were going on, I forget in what decades, but like 60s, 70s, or 50s, 60s, 70s. And it was horrific what happened to Indigenous Canadians. And the headline was, my grandmother survived a residential school. I got to learn more about that before she's gone. It's like, her grandmother's already really old. What are you waiting for? Like, get on that. You know what I'm saying? Because, yeah, each generation has to care somewhat about what happened in the... Maybe that's one of the big disconnects right now, is that the younger generations aren't caring much about what us older people have been through or what we know. And this is a dangerous thing to them, because what do they know, especially this generation after half of the millennials, What do they know about the world before the internet, the world before social media? You know, so they could use some perspective on that probably, but they're probably not interested because they don't realize what's happening to them and their psychology, because what these platforms are attempting to do to all of our psychologies, should we allow it. Glob, there were a few channels that resonated with me. I felt the anger rage, but when that subsided, their message felt biased, to say the least. Haha. Well, yeah, I mean, and maybe there's, probably makes sense that there's a time for different perspectives and whatever. I just think that when people are wholly, as some out there are, like 90% inaccurate, maybe 0.5% accurate, but people can't know that if they're just starting out in the beginning either. Ryan, I'm early in recovery and DBT. It's been hard finding balanced sources on BPD. Your videos have been helpful for me. Often it feels like people are either demonizing or excusing. Yeah, either demonizing or excusing. Well, yeah, and I mean, there are a few videos I have on this channel that probably go so hard one way that they could seem demonizing, But I never mean to demonize people with BPD. And then, by the same token, as you probably know, I make no excuses for people with BPD, though I extend understanding and explanation. But yeah, if you just look at YouTube in general, and, if you watch YouTubers with BPD, you're probably going to see a lot of excuse making. And then watching a lot of other videos, you're going to see a lot of demonizing. And right there on my title is vilifying the borderline keeps you stuck. Meaning, people with codependency got to deal with, some people with BPD are very abusive, and people with codependency are very victimized and traumatized by that. But they need to deal with that now, because to continue to vilify the borderline, people with codependency are often, for their own reasons, it makes sense, in a narrative of but I got blamed for everything, and then I believe what they said, and I didn't do that. Of course. And that's trauma and harmful and abuse. And then there's also when they turn around to try to blame the borderline for everything. That is a lack of people with codependency taking responsibility for what they need to do for themselves still, at times. So it doesn't just go one way. Might not be equal, but it does go both ways. Alicia, I did meet elderly people that were wise and kind-hearted. However, in my family, my parents were the little red caboose to my grandparents' train wreck. I love the way you put that. I'm sorry to hear that, but you put that really well. And you said didn't put me off other older people. Yeah, well, I had a little bit going on in my family with, my grandmothers, I think, were horror stories as mothers. But the one passed away when I was 7, so I didn't get to know her too much. But she was never unkind to me. And then I was babysat a lot by each grandmother. And I would have to say that there was something to that I got a little bit of something. Like a little bit of nurture, a little bit of something that was worse with my mother. But, yeah, I know what you mean, because there was really nobody in my family of the older generation and or generations that was going to be, healthy to really get too deep into anything with. So that was for sure. Oh, wow. I just checked something here and it's like, what's going on with this? Oh, okay, good. I thought I saw more comments, the same as 2 comments earlier, which aren't bad comments, but they're just people still exacerbating and focused on what I'm trying not to focus on here. So, which would be about me, right? So anyway, yeah, I mean, this is probably not I don't know why it would be an unfriendly message to people with codependency, but hopefully it won't be. Hopefully people know where I'm coming from. And I just want to say that that was the best thing I could find for this kind of topic, but where it says in the middle of the thumbnail, I don't feel like I'm wasting my time with explanations. So I just want to make that clear again. But, so this whole live stream, I forgot to hit the stupid subscribe, like button thing, didn't I? Oh, well, who cares? So, anyway, thumbs up on the videos if they're helpful. And I think this, yeah, like, well, you know what? Whether you like when I do this kind of stuff or you don't, it's what I do. And it's just, I think, important to do. So, yeah, there's that. But I don't know. Some people probably just aren't ready for it. Some people don't agree with me at all. Okay. Some people think, you know, like maybe even we'll see the word codependent victims and be turned off. And it's like, well, I just believe in keeping it real to help people heal. And that's what it's about. And I don't think I'm trying to disrespect anybody in that. I mean, I don't know about the other YouTuber, but like, hey, I don't remember why they've earned respect exactly again, right? Because if the respect goes with being a malignant narcissist psychopath, well, I kind of don't do that with those kind of people, if you know what I'm saying. I don't have empathy. I don't have respect for them. And I guess that might go back to having a dark triad father. I don't know. Who cares? I just think it's healthy. You know, healthy to not be swimming upstream, listening to, caring about, interfacing with malignant narcissists and psychopaths. Lottie, it takes all types, so always not everyone is going to be interested in stories and life experiences. It's just these days generations can become rigid sometimes. Well, I think there is more rigidity. More rigidity in the world. More rigidity in lots of people. So, but you know what? To be fair to young people today, there is extreme rigidity in people my age group and above. And I'm just not one of them, but oh yeah. I have friends around my age. They're too rigid. I mean, we're friends, but they'll get into saying some stuff about some stuff, and I just go to the bathroom, or I just really can't go there. Oh, thank you for that, Lou. I do my best. And ironically enough, you know, this message, which wasn't so meant to be anti the other, you know, YouTuber, but like, to keep it real here, you know, it's this kind of stuff that many people might benefit from, but maybe they just want to hear what they want to hear, in which case this doesn't fit into that category. So I just challenge people lightly, you know, to, if they need to still, to question the narrative and the meaning they've layered on top of the experience. So again, maybe I'm trying too hard here, but it's something that I know from working with clients that makes a difference, but doesn't make as much of a difference in a live stream or a video as it can in sessions with clients. There's something I'll go away and think about a little bit after this, because this probably won't be a well-watched live stream. I don't care. I don't do videos to accrue views, because if I did, there'd be no point, would there? I mean, just in comparison to somebody else on BPD can say something that isn't wrong. It's pretty good information, not very deep, and they get 167,000 views on a video in a year. And I'm like, wow, okay. If I get 10 or 12, it's called a miracle. 1,000, I mean, you know. But I don't concern myself with that stuff. You want to play the clickbait popular game? There's a downside to that too. Jessica, as much as some things you say hurt me, it's because they are damn true, and I have to acknowledge them to get better. Well, and just know, Jessica, I'm not trying to hurt anybody, so I'm sorry that some things I say hurt, but again, that is the keeping it real to help people heal, but it's not that my intention is to ever hurt anybody. But yeah, the truth that I talk about, it, you know, I mean, and I have my own life history of my own recovery journeys, etc., where I know that what helps people to grow the most sometimes, unfortunately, is stuff that hurts to hear. So I don't mean to hurt anyone, but people do need to get information that isn't just in the echo chamber narrative that so much of it's in, even when it's equally good information. And Lottie, definitely there is so great rigidity in some older people. But I think people all deserve warmth and hopefully an olive branch. Yeah, well, and with some people that warmth isn't there and an olive branch, they just as soon cut down a tree as give you an olive branch. Jessica, no, nope, I'm still here. I love what you say. You get me. No, no, I understand, but I just wanted to say, because I believe it's important, that I'm sorry that yeah, what am I trying to say actually? Because for people to grow, it's always going to hurt a little bit. But no, I didn't mean that you were taking it that way. I just wanted to reassure people that that obviously isn't my intention, right? Tom, I may have BPD. How do I stop saying things I don't really mean? I have a sophisticated father, a I don't know what you mean there with your father, and a schizophrenic maybe you mean. A schizophrenic father and a schizophrenic sister. Oh, you're welcome, Jessica. I'm sorry to hear that, Tom. How do you stop saying things you don't really mean? Well, I guess by being mindful and paying attention to them, and then more to the point, trying to understand more. Why are you saying them? Like, are you hurt? Are you angry? That kind of thing. And maybe some of the things that you're saying that maybe you feel bad about later that you don't really mean, maybe you do mean them, but maybe there's another way to say them. And or sometimes other people just can't hear them. So it's hard to say, right? Because, I mean, I'm doing the best I can with what, the little information you gave me. But I think just, you need to maybe get in touch with your feelings more, because maybe there's anger, maybe there's a lot of pain there, whether you have BPD or not. And so maybe you say things sometimes emotionally out of pain. I don't know. That's a possibility. But it doesn't mean that there aren't things that you might not still want to express, but maybe you want to express them in a different way. So I think that when you're saying things, you're asking how to stop saying things you don't really mean. You have to first look at, do you really mean them or don't you, in a way? Where is it coming from? What are you feeling inside that's driving what you're saying? So that's kind of just a little bit of general, you could journal about that. You could think about that. And only you would know, right? Because you know what you're saying and what you might mean versus what you don't mean, and that kind of thing. And Lottie, I've noticed that people like even 5 or 10 years apart seem not to relate in friendship, which is strange to me. After 20 years old, people should be able to bridge gap. Well, yeah, but the gaps between all kinds of different groups of people are wider and wider and can't be bridged. And nobody should be trying to bridge a gap, unfortunately, with an untreated person with BPD that hurt them, because there's no there in the middle on the one side. Lou, yeah, I imagine there's a hurt involved. Well, yeah, because I mean that comes along with change and growth and personal growth and healing and recovery anyway, because people often these processes, whatever they may be and why they may be for people in their life, they come with grief, so there's always going to be some hurt there for sure. But the hurt is the transition really from what's known to where one wants to go and what they want to change, how they want to grow, how they want to heal. And I think it's a pretty natural process that. But, we've kind of been inculcated by culture that we shouldn't have to feel pain. And I think feeling pain is as healthy as feeling joy, like depending what you're actually feeling, right? Alicia, when I first heard you speaking a truth, I couldn't see it yet. I just, quote, set it aside, unquote. I couldn't match the info with my feelings. I didn't worry about it all that much. The golden nuggets are solid. Well, thanks for sharing that. That's probably what happens for a lot of people, I would think. And Joe, man, I had an intimate dream this weekend with my ex in it. These dreams make no contact feel totally broken somehow. Definitely feels like a few steps back. Well, it's when you're dreaming these things, it's your unconscious still trying to work it out more, right? And so as it tries to bring more to your consciousness about your experience, yeah, I hear you. It can be a little bit feeling like it's pulling you back. But I think you just have to acknowledge that and be as determined as ever, when you're awake, at least consciously, to, it feels like a few steps back, right? But try not to take, like a few steps back. To take steps forward in any healing recovery journey is fine. But you don't want the steps back to include contacting the ex again. And, Lou, yes, feeling pain is important. It can shape us and hopefully bring wisdom. Yes, because what is resisted, right? What we resist, like pain, will just persist. And in fact, it actually gets worse with time if we don't go and take care of it and acknowledge it and work and heal and recover and grow from it. And Tom said, yes, and I thank you. Yes, it is the past anger coming out. I'm 49. It's hard. You are a wonderful woman person. Oh, thank you for that, Tom. It's very humbling. Yeah, so you see, in a way, what I was encouraging you to explore is the fact that, it's the past hurt, or you said past anger coming out. And, under anger or rage, and I'm not saying you're raging, but under anger or rage is loss, right? So there's a lot of hurt and pain under there. And so that's what I meant by when you say something you don't really mean, you may well bloody mean it. And then the only difference is, do you want to say it that way? Do you need to say it that way? Or can you work on it yourself and then reframe it? And if you still need to say something, whether you get hurt or not, you can say it in a different way. So that's just part of working it through and growing. So, I can think back in my life to when I was still in contact with family of origin and some of the things that I said. And the only difference, I guess, between you and I in this regard is when I had said them, I meant them. So I didn't have any... I'm not saying I didn't feel guilty at all, but when I screamed at my parents in words I used, I meant them. And I was okay with that. So, and there was no way to have a conversation with them, as it turned out, ever. I tried a couple of times. They sat through... I read the book Toxic Parents, and in there she has this... I don't know if confrontation is the right word, but to be able to say things to a person that's hurt you or a parent. And so they actually came, but it was because my mother wanted back in control of my life, not because for a good reason. And they sat there and listened to me say, I wrote it out the way that, the book suggested, and it was 3+ decades ago now. But it was probably almost 40 years ago now. And I wrote down, I never felt loved, I never felt seen, I never felt hurt. I didn't write you did this, that, the other. But they just basically sat there and, sat it out and then denied a lot of stuff. And all that exercise really got me was a chance to say what I needed to say. And they sat there, but I don't think they really heard it. And then they knew where I lived again, and we were back in contact at that point. And that was a long time ago. And then after that, because I couldn't go to their place, it had to be on my turf, so to speak. But I had to try it. And that was part of what informed me going forward that I was going to go no contact. Because I really didn't get hurt. And that's okay. Joe, yeah, definitely that would be a few too many steps back to restart contact. Yes. I even had a dream before my ex was almost about to confess something to me. Geez, those dreams can stir up some stuff. Yeah, well, and it's your unconscious still trying to work it out. So, and something that can help with that, but I mean, I still the odd night have the weirdest dreams that come from the past, and not like traumatic ones, but just dreams where maybe an ex-partner from a long time ago is in it, or quiet borderline ex from the 80s is in it, and I'm like, her again, what does this mean? Because I mean, it's not recent for me in that regard with this one I'm talking about. But, the unconscious is always still trying to work out things. And then there's whatever people are still grappling with themselves in their own healing recovery journeys is likely to, be on your mind or to a degree, and then you go to sleep and more of it's coming up. And that always is difficult to deal with, because if we dream something, it feels like it's not really, quote, fair, unquote, because we can't not do it, right? Like, would that you could go to sleep and somehow make that not happen. But if you just go with the flow, if you process what you're dreaming, if you journal about it, especially too, can be really helpful, because the more that you deal with it consciously, the less it's going to keep coming in the dreams. Because, I think that's the natural progression. You dream about it, and it can be those kind of dreams you wake up really feeling it. And then if you journal about it, and then you're getting it out of yourself again, and you keep moving forward, and you'll find new understanding and more healing in that. And then maybe the reason why you're having the dreams, like more often than not for people, will stop at some point. So anyway, with that, just getting real long again, I should probably get going. So I think that's what I shall do. But really a pleasure as always, and I was frustrated in the beginning, but never mind that. Things happen. That's, I think, pretty much part of humanity, isn't it? And I wasn't frustrated at any person. I'm frustrated with the, narrative thing that I started talking about. So anyway, everybody take care, and thumbs up on this if you feel like that would be commiserate with how you experienced it. And look forward to next time. So everybody take care of yourself, and don't be afraid to hear something new or something that doesn't just jibe with you as fantastic to hear, because you want to find your way to as much of your truth and motivation to heal and change as you possibly can. And I hope that helps you, Joe. It will if you do it. So everybody take care.